signed. Committee Room 21, 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 signed. Committee Room 21. 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 Signed.
Meeting of the session, our 90th meeting overall.
21. Signed. Committee Room 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 21. Signed.
Okay, members, I'd like to welcome members of the public to the meeting and advise that they are welcome to use public devices if they are in airplane mode and all devices are muted. Not permitted to take photographs or record any of the meetings. Do you have any apologies?
Michelle's an apology.
Michelle McAllister, yeah. And then they might have one member attend by Zoom. Yeah, I think it's all you attend.
Chair Michael, do we have any? Okay.
Yeah. Any declarations of interest? Okay.
Chair, I declared interest in the Hunting with Dogs Bill, which is on the agenda for today in correspondence.
Okay. Members, like to. I'm now seeking agreement to go straight to agenda item 6 for a session with the Minister. As you know, he has to get away to the budget talks, and then we'll come back to agenda item 3. Members, okay if we can just jump on to agenda item 6? Yep. Agreed. Okay.
Page 13.
Second here, I give this afterwards. Okay, agenda item 6 is the evidence sessions from Minister Muir, updating the current DAERA issues and programmes. I refer you to page 53 of PAC to a copy of the interim business plan 26-27, and which you noted last week. And I now welcome the Minister and Katrina to brief the committee and answer any questions we may have. And we know that the time is short than planned, but I know you have very important talks to go to the Minister. So take the floor, please.
Thank you very much, Chair, and I want to thank you for the entire committee for the opportunity to return here, and also for your flexibility with regards to timings. So I will keep my opening remarks very brief, so we'll give us as much opportunity as we can for questions. For me, this is a useful opportunity for both myself and also Katrina as Permanent Secretary to provide a short update in terms of our progress that my department is making in terms of delivering our key pledges and priorities as set out in the DAERA's corporate plan. Before I move to that update, I would like to thank the committee for its work, for its interest, and for the scrutiny function that it undertake. This is very valuable, and I very much appreciated the cooperative and constructive relationship we have with the committee. In relation to the actions that we've been taking, firstly in relation to climate change, over the last few months we've published the third Northern Ireland Climate Change Adaptation Programme. We've secured Assembly approval for the Just Transition Commission regulations, launched the appointments process for that commission, and now also finalising Northern Ireland's first climate action plan. I have also emphasised the importance of robust climate evidence through recent engagement with the Met Office and stakeholders. In relation to the environment and water quality, as the recent Office of Environmental Protection report noted, we've made some progress in delivering the actions in our environmental improvement plan, but we need to do much better. I'm committed to delivering the progress needed at pace, but will not make the progress we need without that cross-party support. I recognise the committee's interest in nutrient pressures, slurry management and the Nutrients Action Programme. Monday represented a really important moment, and I strongly welcome the stakeholder-led proposals which are now out for consultation. Water quality more generally remains a key priority for me, particularly in relation to Lough Neagh, and good progress continues to be made in implementing the Lough Neagh Action Plan. Progress has also been made in land use, including a new tree action plan and also significant new investment in peatland restoration. However, while the farming community is stepping up to play its part, and I commend them for that, the position with regards to wastewater remains a significant concern and represents a significant legal risk for the executive and cannot, in my view, be ignored any longer. In relation to animal health, biosecurity and animal welfare, on animal health, I've continued to take science-informed decisions to tackle disease prevalence and support our farm businesses and trade. We have permitted blue tongue vaccination under general licence, supported updated guidance and stakeholder engagement. On bovine TB, this is a critical issue for me and for my department. A consultation on wildlife intervention options will launch tomorrow, alongside wider eradication measures including enhanced testing, biosecurity support and herd level controls that is underway. We're also progressing key animal welfare reforms, including Lucy's Law, mandatory CCTV in abattoirs, which has now been passed, the dog breeding review and voluntary bovine electronic identification. In terms of agri-food and farming, I recognise the importance of this not just to our economy, but also to our rural way of life, and it's important we continue the work we're doing under the Sustainable Agriculture Programme, and I remain fully committed to its continued rollout. Since March, I've opened the second year of the Farm with Nature Transition Scheme, expanded eligibility in response to feedback, and launched the Farm with Nature Hire Scheme to support priority habitats and designated areas. Further schemes will launch later this year. In terms of fisheries, marine environment and coastal communities, The Fisheries, Aquaculture and Water Environment Bill is now with the Committee for scrutiny, and I thank members for their constructive contributions at the second stage debate on that. Measures have been introduced to protect European eel stocks, and officials are progressing support for those directly affected. And I will meet the Lough Neagh Fishermen's Cooperative this afternoon. Consultation is also launched on offshore marine protected areas, while the Marine Environment and Fisheries Fund will continue to support coastal communities. We have committed almost £8 million to tackling rural poverty and isolation alongside additional support for community infrastructure. Further schemes will launch later this year. I know the committee is also looking forward to hearing from officials about the consultation responses received to our rural policy, Rural NI, our new approach. Members will be aware, in terms of the budget, of the reality that we are now facing with no agreed budget and the very real difficulties this creates for me as Minister and for Katrina as Accountant Officer. The Department continues to operate in a constrained financial environment, requiring careful prioritisation. I'll be making the case for the Department and for the functions that we discharge in the talks later today at Hillsborough. Chair, across all of these areas, my focus remains on practical delivery, picking up the pace to deliver results for all our areas of our environment, our economy and our rural communities. Katrina and I will be happy to do our best in the short time I have available to answer members' questions on the issues I've mentioned or indeed any other matters. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Minister, in your briefing you had mentioned about the issue of on the notes of you're aware that the Nutrient Action Plan is out for consultation now, and there's like it's a 30% P reduction that wants to be achieved over the next 4 years. And obviously one of the issues that I've been highlighting and others is the issue of slurry management, and particularly the ability to export down to the south, where in parts of the south there is a phosphate deficit where we have phosphate surplus. Minister, is there any update in terms of reducing those regulatory barriers which had been creating an impediment for that export issue, Minister?
Thank you, Declan. So, first thing I would like to say in relation to the Nutrients Action Programme, which is out for consultation, is to commend the leadership and the commitment of all the stakeholders involved in that group, which was chaired by Karen Brosnan excellently, and the groups involved represent a wide range of interests in relation to both agri-food but also environmental groups. And I respect the work that they've done, and that is out for consultation. And we need to recap in terms of the organisations that have been involved in this and those that I have the utmost respect for. So it includes the Ulster Farmers Union, includes NIAPA, includes the Dairy Council, Nature Friendly Farming Network, Northern Ireland Environment Link, which included representatives from RSPB, Ulster Wildlife, Rivers Trust. Also in relation to Northern Ireland Food and Drink Association, the Northern Ireland Meat Exporters Association, Northern Ireland Grain Trade Association, Northern Ireland Pork and Bacon Forum, Northern Ireland Poultry Industry Federation. There's been a collective will around this, and I want to commend them for that. What's out for consultation to me meets what we were seeking to achieve, which is measures that are practical at farm level with realistic timeframes but also meet our legal obligations. In relation to our legal obligations, and that probably comes through to the question you've asked in terms of that transboundary exports, I'm aware that this issue at hand is often being dealt with by Shared Environmental Services, which is hosted by Mid and East Antrim Borough Council. I had a constructive meeting with them a few weeks ago, and we're going to continue to follow up on that. But what we've got to do is make sure that we're meeting all our requirements associated with this to enable that to occur, and that's something I'm going to continue to engage with Shared Environmental Services, and also request the partners in the south to come together to find a solution to this, Declan.
Okay, thank you. And Minister, see, connected to that there, and on our topic is the TB. We know the impact, the serious, obviously, economic impact of TB, the personal impact on farm businesses, and the animal welfare impact it has on cattle as well. But Minister, this is also connected to our ability to reduce our pea surplus as well, because obviously closed herds are extremely inefficient and produce more efficiencies. Has there been any progress in terms of advancing the TB strategy to get to grips with the very high rate of TB that we have in herds here?
You've raised a really key issue, not just for me or Katrina as Accountant Officer, because the cost it has to the Department, but more fundamentally in terms of those family farm businesses across Northern Ireland. Because as the report that came out a number of weeks ago highlighted, whilst we do 100% compensation, that doesn't cover the full costs that farm businesses are experiencing around this, and also the mental health impact around it. This does point to the fact that we have a blueprint around that, and we commend the stakeholders who came together to allow us to be able to publish that and for their work in terms of engaging with us on this. There's significant actions taking place, and whilst tomorrow we go out to consult in relation to wildlife intervention options, and are very, very keen that people respond to that consultation, and whatever we do in that space is correct, because we want to be able to follow due process in regards to that. There has been good progress in relation to other areas, and as you know, the focus is in terms of people, cattle and wildlife. It is a holistic approach around this. We have the regionalised research initiative in the Northwest and in Donegal, and that's been shown to be a lot of interest from farmers in the area in terms of a high level actually permitting us to do the badger set surveys on their farms. Alongside that, we've increased the amount of interferon gamma testing, and we think it's important we do that so that we can fully understand where there is infections around this. Alongside that, we're going to go out and tender for vet-led on-farm biosecurity advice, and I think that's absolutely critical that we're able to give that advice to farmers around that. There's lots of other stuff we're doing in terms of how we do testing and how we deal with those where, for example, there is it's an inconclusive test. We want to make sure that we're having a better grip in relation to the level of infection. That may mean that the level of infection in the short term may be seen to rise, but that's because we're doing more active work to actually identify it and be able to get on top of this. Alongside that, as I said, there is also the wildlife intervention, which we are going to consult on tomorrow. So there is a concerted effort around this. I don't want to say any more on this, Katrina, but this is a big focus from not just ourselves, but also in terms of veterinary staff and stakeholders.
Yeah, I think just to add, we're seeing, I think, stakeholders coming together very, very effectively. And one of the other things maybe worth mentioning in response to your question, Declan, is the work that's underway for criteria for alternative control herds. We also saw, I think it was the week before last, the TB strategy published in England. And it's interesting to see that it seems to be following a lot of things that were set out in the CVO's report and then the blueprint, so that's been encouraging. We're keeping very, very close eye on progress in the south, in Wales, in England. The CVOs across all 5 jurisdictions meet very, very regularly. In fact, they were all in Clare House just a few weeks ago talking about sharing their expertise and the interventions that they're pursuing on bovine TB. So the conversation never stops. I think the work on the control herd, the alternative control herds, will also address some of the concerns that have been raised too, including around stocking densities and animal welfare issues.
Yeah, I think I have to accentuate that point. The work we're doing here may lead to a short-term rise in identification of TB, but because we're doing a concerted effort, particularly in terms of increasing the use of essentially the blood testing in terms of identification of TB in herds. But it's important we do that because we want to move towards the ultimate legal requirement, which is eradication. There is across, and Katrina said this, across the rest of the UK and Ireland, there's lots of lessons to be learned. So I'll be going to the Royal Welsh Show and engaging with my colleagues over in Wales to see what they've been doing around that, and also then that cooperation on a cross-border basis with our colleagues in the south. And that's something that we have a benefit in terms of working together on this.
Thank you. I'm going to move around the room. John, you're first on the list.
Chair, thank you. Minister, thank you for that brief but very full presentation, and Katrina, thank you as well for being here. If I can make a couple of comments, Chair, if you don't mind, just before I ask a couple of questions. First of all, you touched there on animal welfare issues, and just to say to the committee, with the Minister and Permanent Secretary here, that I attended a Dogs Trust event with responsible dog ownership guide launch in London on Tuesday, and then I had another meeting after that with the League Against Cruel Sports. I have to say, from a Dogs Trust point of view, the focus on dog issues and the dog breeder review that you mentioned is very welcome, and I've encouraged them to engage with the department and local councils on the responsible ownership issue, and hopefully that will go further. Additionally, I want to say well done on the progress to you, Minister, Permanent Secretary, and the various teams in DAERA who have worked very hard on the Nutrient Action Programme. and I know they've been doing that engagement very, very regularly. The committee had its own stakeholder event, but the department have been working on this month on month in the various business areas. The questions that I have are based on that and the £49 million announcement of shared island funding for Lough Neagh, the NAP, the shared island funding, and also, Minister, your stated intention to deal with Northern Ireland Water's contribution to our pollution problem in Northern Ireland are all very closely linked. So the questions are, firstly, is there any more information the committee could benefit from in relation to the good that will come from that £49 million shared island funding and how that can help with Lough Neagh? And then secondly, acknowledging your repeatedly stated opinion that Sorby needs to be dealt with and that Northern Ireland Water and Department for Infrastructure need to step up in that regard. Can you give us any indication of any progress made there, proposals you may have made, and what the buy-in is from Infrastructure, Northern Ireland Water and any others that are relevant?
Thank you, John. Just to come back to the first bit in terms of animal welfare, and I'm grateful for the positive feedback around this. There is strong public support for us to be able to take further measures to tackle animal cruelty in Northern Ireland, and we're seeing that in terms of the responses to the current consultation. They're very significant. And it's my desire that we progress these. A lot of this, we wish to do this in partnership with district councils, and a number of these measures, there will be full cost recovery around that. So we're very attuned to the financial challenges of council, but we're also very conscious of our wider responsibilities to the citizens of Northern Ireland to tackle animal cruelty around this. In relation to Lough Neagh, the £49 million, which was recently announced, is a result of good work we've done with the Irish Government in terms of shared island support. For some that are not aware, we have a sustainable catchment programme in a number of areas in Northern Ireland. If the committee wishes to go and see that in operation, I'm sure officials could facilitate that. I saw that about 2 years ago down in Catesbridge, and essentially this involves on-farm advice from an independent organisation, in that case which I saw, which was from Rivers Trust, and also then support for nature-based solutions, so whether that's in terms of tree planting, riparian buffer strips, but also fencing, and that is shown to have a very significant and positive impact in terms of improving water quality, but also supporting farmers in the journey around that. And this will allow us to be able to roll that out in the Blackwater catchment, and then as time progresses and if funds allow, then other catchment areas within Lough Neagh. It's my aspiration we would have that across the whole of Northern Ireland, but we have to take one step at a time in terms of both financing and resource around this in terms of people to do the job. So this is a significant intervention. It goes in tandem with our wider aspiration to in terms of management of nutrients within agriculture, and we're soon going to launch the Sustainable Farm Investment Programme, which is another example of us being able to support farmers in terms of the adoption of technology which allow us to do that. The work that's been done in relation to the Nutrients Action Programme is historic. We have farming representatives, we have environmental groups and agri-food industry coming together to find a way through a problem and being able to deliver that vision, which is a thriving, resilient and environmentally sustainable future for agriculture, but also in terms of improving water quality. And it just shows you what we can do when people work together in relation to this, and we're able to come forward with proposals which are out for consultation. What this does, however, highlight is that we have to tackle all the sources of pollution. And I come into politics because I believe in fairness. It's a fundamental principle that drives me day and daily, is fairness. We have to be able to make sure that we're doing everything correct and proper, but we're playing everything with a straight bat. And in relation to wastewater pollution, this is an issue that's causing me increasing concern, because I've had 2 proposals with the executive now for the last number of months, and they do need to be agreed. And one of those is in relation to the special regime that's been afforded to Northern Ireland Water since it was established in 2007, and that is known as SORPI. Many of you are aware of that arrangement in place. To me, it's neither right, nor fair, nor potentially even lawful that we have that arrangement in place. And the situation, I cannot look farmers in the eye and say to them that the largest corporate polluter in Northern Ireland has a special deal in relation to this. And for those who come back to me and say about the implications associated with this, I've been working with the Infrastructure Minister very constructively in terms of an orderly withdrawal from this, and that's something we're seeking to do. But as the Independent Review of Environmental Governance set out in their final report in relation to SORPI, which they recommended we withdraw from, they set out in the report that instead the lack or the low level of penalties for wastewater pollution has weakened the case for sufficient investment, given the impression that the current situation is acceptable. It's not acceptable, and we have to deal with this. But alongside SORPI, there's other actions we must take. The Office of Environmental Protection are investigating both my department, but also Department for Infrastructure, and also Utility Regulator in terms of consent to discharge. And we will seek to engage with that investigation, but members need to be aware that the outcome from that is likely to be that those reviews in terms of consents to discharge may mean that we will then have to go back and say, you need to upgrade this, and if you don't, then we cannot consent to discharge in relation to that. So there's fundamental issues in relation to wastewater that we need to get to grip with, because what's happening is not only is it constraining house building and economic development, and then thereby pushing up the cost of living for people in Northern Ireland, but it's also destroying our rivers, lakes and lochs. And that cannot continue around that. I have a duty under the law. I take the environmental duties that we have in Northern Ireland very, very seriously, and we're seeking to fulfil them. But we have to have honest and courageous conversations in relation to this issue.
John?
Very quick follow-up.
John, go ahead.
Chair, Minister, look, I'm well aware of executive confidentiality and sensitivity sometimes around these matters, but in a situation where there's one rule for the agri sector and another rule for Northern Ireland Water, and the Department for Infrastructure Minister really needs to acknowledge this and deal with this and accept that you're working together. But is it fair to say then that there is a delay at executive on this?
There's a significant delay. I have a spreadsheet out of executive papers that are not being progressed, and whilst I really appreciate the constructive engagement with the Infrastructure Minister in relation to these issues, these papers need to get on the agenda for decision. And in the case of executive at the moment, the last 3 meetings have been held on Teams, and an awful lot of executive business is picture no sound, and we need to find a way to resolve these issues.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Apologies. Thank you very much for coming this morning. And Tom, you're next.
Thank you, Chair. Minister, thank you for coming again to committee this morning. Just a few wee issues. With regards to the ammonia and the problems that that's having with the planning issues for farmers who want to betterment their farms, if you like, and their buildings, they're not able to reach the targets that's been set, and therefore, you know, they can demonstrate that they can put up a new building and that'll reduce their ammonia levels by 80, maybe more, maybe 90%, but they can't do that because they can't meet this target that's set. What has actually been done to try and help that situation and allow farmers to move forward?
Thank you, Tom. And this is I'm glad you raised it, because it's a key issue for the farming community, but also for the environment in Northern Ireland. And there has been significant and sustained work by officials in regards to this in recent months, working with stakeholders, primarily in relation to Northern Ireland Environment Link, but also the Ulster Farmers Union in regards to this. And what we're seeking to do is finalise our proposals in regards to this, because this fits into our wider discussions in relation to how we better manage nutrients. What I want to see us to move into a situation is we have a strategic ammonia reduction programme, which will have a Northern Ireland-wide programme to be able to reduce the level of emissions, and that is a requirement to us under law, and we need to demonstrate that, and there's a lot of work being put together in regards to that. If we have a strategic ammonia reduction programme, that means that in terms of applications for like replacement, or in that they will be able to be dealt with much differently compared to the current situation, because we have an overall wide approach to reduce the emissions, but also in terms of like replacements, Tom, they're likely to have a better environmental footprint than the current situation, but also allows to have, ideally, this is what we would like to get into, is permitted development rights for covered slurry stores, so we're able to get farmers so they can actually have those, because I understand the pressures that farmers face in relation to, for example, the close period, and when, for example, in the recent winter, it was very heavy rainfall that people were highlighting to me in terms of the capacity issues around that. So that's what we're seeking to get to. We want to make sure we do it right. You're probably aware we were investigated around this, and action was taken against the department in 2023. So we want to make sure we put together this correctly, so then we can give confidence to the farming community, but also to the wider environment on the way forward. And this is another example where stakeholders have been working constructively with the department on this, and I commend them for that.
Is there any indication of a timeline for that as to when that will be?
Yeah, so what we wanted to do was to finalise it around now, but there's a few more things we want to do to make sure we've got it right. So hopefully I don't want to put pressure on officials because we've been working really hard on this, but hopefully in the autumn we'll be able to set that out. I understand the importance of this, Tom, because also in terms of animal welfare requirements, particularly farrowing and the better chicken commitment, there's a wider need in terms of housing around this. So I do believe there's a way forward. I think it's fair to say officials have been working quite hard on this.
They are. I mean, quite no, very. But I think the key thing, given the challenges that we've faced and given the investigations that we've had to go through, is that we get it right. There's no point in agreeing something which stakeholders are happy with and unpicks itself 10 minutes later in the courts.
You did talk about the Lough Neagh Action Plan and about the good progress which has been made on that, and that's to be welcomed. What progress is being made then with NI Water with regards to the pollution that's gone into the waterways? Because we hear that about the tons of pollution that's gone in every week, every day, every week, whatever. So what progress, if any, has been made on that front?
On the 3rd of March, I came to the Chamber and set out the 8 interventions I wish to pursue to have that stronger regulation and enforcement around Northern Ireland Water. I recognise that in terms of Northern Ireland Water as a body, that's responsibility for the Infrastructure Minister in terms of the investments that are required. And I've been on the record very clearly that we need to be courageous. We need to look at ways to make sure that we're levering that investment into Northern Ireland Water, because it's in all our interest that we're able to do that. And I support the Infrastructure Minister in regards to that. But we need to be cognizant of all the reports that are piling up, most particularly in relation to Northern Ireland Audit Office, in terms of us looking at this with a different lens. But my responsibilities sit in relation to the water quality and the environment more broadly. And I set out those 8 key interventions. One, which was legislating for stronger fines and penalties via the Fisheries, Aquaculture and Water Environment Bill, and that is now progressing. And that would ensure that we have our fines in line with Great Britain, but also we have the ability to issue fixed penalty notices, which allows us to avoid the unnecessary criminalisation of people, but also allows us to be more agile in terms of dealing with this. The second one is in terms of reviewing the sentencing for environmental crimes, and that's underway through the Department of Justice. The third is leaving that special arrangement that's been in place with Northern Ireland Water since 2007, otherwise known as SORPI. I think we need to leave that in an orderly manner, and I believe in fairness, as I've set out, but also we need to make sure that we're, in terms of the regulatory functions of Northern Ireland Environment Agency, that they're not constrained through administrative arrangements such as that. The fourth is in terms of making that special designation for Belfast Lough. The only reason Belfast Lough is not like Lough Neagh is because it's seawater. So there's a fundamental requirement for intervention in relation to Belfast Lough. The fifth is in terms of reviewing those discharge consents. We're under an obligation to do that. We're being investigated around that, but people need to be cognizant where that's going to go in terms of those discharge consents, because it's likely as a result of a review we're not going to be able to consent a significant number of those. The sixth is in relation to improving the monitoring and reporting of Northern Ireland Water's activities. We need to have a clearer sight in relation to what's going on, and we need to have event duration monitors not only in place but also so that people can see in terms of near real-time reporting around that. The seventh is I need to clarify the impact of PC21 not being funded, and the eighth was setting up an independent environmental protection agency, and I'm very disappointed that we're not able to do that. In relation to clarifying the impact of PC21 not being fully funded, I need to be very clear around that. That is obviously a decision that's been made by the Infrastructure Minister and in relation to Northern Ireland Water in terms of how they engage around that. But in terms of the officials within the Northern Ireland Environment Agency, they have a professional view that they have to express in relation to this, and if Northern Ireland Water wish to continue the policy of no detriment, they do that at their own risk. And we have to just be honest in terms of the impact of not funding that investment taking place. So I'm taking all the actions that I can in relation to this. This is something of increasing concern, particularly in the context of the agreement that's been reached and announced on Monday in relation to NAP. We have to deal with wastewater pollution, not only because of the impact on the environment, but it's the lack of investment is constraining house building and economic development, which is pushing up the cost of living for people in Northern Ireland.
Okay, Chair, just one other brief issue, and if there's any time afterwards then we can come on something else. You named climate change, and of course we know that you're very passionate about climate change and that type of thing, but we can see how climate change targets at this moment in time is hindering infrastructure development. So have you ever, or will you give any consideration, and I know this has been asked to you on previous occasions, to reducing those targets somewhat in order to allow infrastructure projects to progress?
You're aware, Tom, that there's an ongoing legal case that's under appeal in relation to the A5. What I would say in relation to the targets, and I've set out in position in regards to this, the first climate action plan requires a 33% reduction. That is in line with what was previously in terms of the advice which was received from the Climate Change Committee in response to a very specific question, which they said 82%. So the first climate action plan is aligned with 82%, and I had a motion from your party asking me to withdraw it. So if the issue is in relation to targets, I'm really questioning that, because if the ask is to align with 82%, the target in terms of the first climate action plan stays the same.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Just before I bring Eve in case I forget in regard to that one, did you indicate that you get that? We did have a meeting, an extra meeting on CAP that was cancelled.
Yes.
Do you want to explain to us why it was cancelled?
We're currently finalising the climate action plan, and it's a very detailed piece of work, and I'm very grateful for the officials in regards to that. So once that's finalised and we can get that off to the executive, we'll set that up. But it's just when you see the paperwork associated with it, you'll understand.
Look forward to it. Aoife?
Yeah, thank you, and apologies for being late. We had the ad hoc committee, so appreciate the briefing. So, Minister, unless farmers can see a clear benefit from carbon audits through recognition of existing carbon sequestration measure of their farms through hedgerow woodlands, do you accept that secure and support carbon audits to be conditional will be challenging?
Thank you, and you can say suspectation better than me.
Not too sure I could.
Second that motion.
I slowed it down.
I just say carbon storage. So what we've got to do is, in terms of the carbon footprinting project, we need to appoint a supplier for that, and then we need to roll that out. And I recognise the issues you're outlining, which are technical issues in terms of what we capture around this. There's a wider piece as well that we need to be very conscious if we're just going to focus in terms of carbon storage around that, is that there's also biodiversity in terms of what's happening on farms, and we want to give farmers credit for that and look at this in a wider sphere. So I recognise the points you're outlining, and we want to have a discussion with stakeholders, particularly in relation to these issues, because the desire is that in terms of the carbon footprinting project, that will be a conditionality associated with the farm sustainability payment, but we want to bring people with us in regards to that.
Thank you. So, see your sustainable farming investment grant. So we're getting a lot of questions in through the constituency office as to when that is going to open up and when the application process is going to take. And look, farmers are aware that it's targeted towards business efficiency and emission reduction, ammonia reduction, and so on. So they're just wanting to know when that's going to open up.
No, so it'll be an announcement next week, and it'll open up for applications later on this month.
Okay.
Yeah, so what we wanted to do is to publish the consultation in relation to the NAP, so people understood what their proposals were, and then launch the Sustainable Farm Investment Scheme afterwards, because our worry was that in terms of making an announcement maybe a week before that, people would have read into that thinking that that was the NAP. So we just need to separate two of the issues in terms of the capital support that comes after that. Just to be clear as well, this is up to £40 million of support to the farming community for engagement in relation to, for example, LSA and other technologies that are available. We think that's quite important alongside the other interventions we're making.
Yeah, look, that's all from me.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay,
yeah, just I suppose focusing on the NAP, in terms of the consultation, I know there's a end date there for the 7th of September, if I'm right. Is there any flexibility in that, just given the fact, I know you're maybe thinking this is going to be asked, but just given the summer is an ultra busy season for most of the rural communities in Northern Ireland, and their minds are very much on other things, as you can imagine, i.e. making a living, and
yes.
You know, I know this body winds down a little in terms of the legislative function over the summer, but you know, given the fact that we're heading into September and the wheels are going to be speeding up, is there an opportunity for some flexibility, even a few weeks, to allow the wider community to fully engage and ensure that there is enough time for them to respond to what is significant proposal?
Yeah. No, I understand the point you're making around this, and we have a context this where we're well overdue in terms of reviewing the NAP. We've got legal obligations in regard to that. Once the consultation closes, we need to evaluate the responses, and then we need to then seek executive approval. So there's a process that has to be undertaken, and that window is relatively tight because the last sitting day of this assembly is the 16th of March. I understand the concerns around this, and We originally were looking at 8 weeks, but I took on board the feedback from stakeholders, and I did perhaps stretch officials quite significantly in regards to this, and I apologise to them for that by agreeing 10, okay, but 12 is just, for us in terms of the timelines we're working at, in the context as well that this was previously consulted about, and also there's been a stakeholder group to spend a significant amount of time going through this. We think that 10 is probably the way we need to land us. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that's, the approved executive position on consultations is 8 weeks, and the Minister has decided in response to requests from the UFU and others to extend it to 10.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I know when
I know
you're,
the
when you're
point.
rolling
I
out,
know the point you're making.
when you're rolling out an extension lead, there's always a wee bit of red tape near the end, but there's always another couple of feet, but you're saying you're at the
Yeah,
mark,
like we're settled at that. It's probably the best we can do, but we want to
It's beyond my comfort zone already.
Just another point, just on, I know you touched on the fact, the end of the mandate, it will be fast approaching after that. Do you see secondary legislation being required in terms of the NAP?
Yeah, so it does require secondary legislation, and I'm very conscious that what we're trying to find something, and I think we have, which is workable at farm level with realistic timeframes, but also that support which Aoife touched upon in terms of Sustainable Farm Investment Scheme, and try to bring all that together. So there's a lot of work doing this around it all, but also we need to meet our legal obligations, and that's where we do that through secondary legislation once we receive, hopefully, executive approval in regards to this. I would say to you that in terms of the work we've been doing around NAP, but also Tom brought up in relation to ammonia, and then other stuff which we've been outlining in relation to TB. I don't underestimate, by the way, the challenges in relation to TB and the toll that that's having. I do believe that we're making progress in regards to this in terms of dealing with these fundamental issues, which allows us to build agriculture in terms of firm foundations going forward, because we'll need to give that confidence around that. The other aspect as well, Daniel's not here, so I will cover this, is in terms of NEA planning performance as well. I know this has been raised a number of times within the committee, but there's been significant work done in relation to that so that we can improve our response times to planning applications, because I know that all these issues all come together to actually, in terms of the farming community and their concerns that are been regularly raised with me.
Just two more. One, just when you're touching on the shared environmental service issue continues to be a massive problem, as you know. In terms of your high level engagement with them, on NIEA, those two bodies seem to be quite restrictive in terms of consultation responses.
Yes.
Have you had direct engagement with shared environmental service, and if so, how have you found them as a body to deal with?
I did have that direct engagement a few weeks ago. We have to. There's a wider role here for local government, okay? Because shared environmental services is it's a shared service amongst 11 councils. And in terms of the 11 councils and the elected representatives that we all have on them, I think they need to have a greater understanding of how this service functions, and then their role in terms of accountability, because essentially those district councils have agreed to set that service up. Now, NILGA were at that meeting that I had with Shared Environmental Services, and I think it was useful to get them an insight in regards to this issue. But I think there's a wider discussion that needs to be had with NILGA, and I have been having that. But I think for yourselves as a committee, with your political colleagues, need to be able to take that on. In relation to Northern Ireland Environment Agency, I've been candid in relation to the challenges around this and the response times, and also the responses you've been getting as elected representatives needed to be better. For example, previously when you're writing to me, you got a letter back saying, well, we're really busy, we can't really give you an update. I didn't think that was acceptable, and hopefully now you're getting a bit more of an update. But Katrina could perhaps outline a bit more in terms of the concerted work that's been done to improve those response times.
Yeah, and I know it was a concern for me, a concern for the Minister, and it's been raised by many of you in the committee as well. There has been, I think, very significant progress. The trick for us now is to make sure that the agency keeps it up, so there wouldn't be any room for complacency at all. But if I take the period from April to the middle of June, over 860 consultation requests come in, 97% on target, and I'm told the other cases are on track to be on target. Now, the agency still has a backlog, and the decision really was whether it, kept going through the backlog and then everything would constantly be late, or whether it would try and do a bit of both. So on requests coming in at the moment, absolute credit to the agency chief executive, to Liz the director, and to her team. They really have pulled out all the stops, and we're starting to see real progress. But as I've said, there is no scope to take any feet off any pedals, because I think we all know how easy it can be to slip back. So positive at the moment, but still more to be done.
Yeah. On the sorry, Gareth, and I know I'm probably defeating myself in terms of the time limits around this, and we're happy to answer these questions. See, in terms of those issues with shared environmental services, they're quite complex, okay? And if there's any merit for like an informal meeting of the committee over the summer to take you through some of those issues, it might be useful to understand what the issues are around this, because they are quite complex in relation to environmental law in the defence of shared environmental services. So I'm sure some of the guys from our ammonia team and stuff like that could, sit down with some of you if you wanted to take you through that, to outline what those issues are, because I recognise the importance this is. And what happens, we have an ammonia policy, we have shared environmental services, and we have NEA plan and performance, and sometimes they get fused together, and I think it's just important for people to understand this so you can help your constituents.
Yeah, and I don't think it helps themselves sometimes, SAS, by sort of hiding away, well, they don't hide away, but they have the perception of being closed off and sort of an arm's length to us, which isn't helpful. But anyway, one last question, if I may, just the clean air strategy. I know that's raising some concerns out in rural communities. How do you see that working out, and do you see a threat to the good old wood-burning stove that so many rural people rely on for their heating over the winter months?
He's worried about his own stove.
So we're going to go out and consult in the autumn around this. There's been a lot of work undertaken in this. Can I say other departments have a role in relation to this, particularly economy and infrastructure with regards to transport emissions, but also in relation to energy more broadly. I know that the UK government have been consultant in relation to, essentially, if you're going to buy wood-burning stoves, the information is provided when people are buying them in terms of the emissions around that, so people have a fuller knowledge around this. What we're seeking to have to achieve here is a just transition. So, for example, those who are in the worst field of poverty are often people who are reliant upon coal. Now, that's not good for them, because it's probably not the most efficient use of resources and cost, but also in terms of the impact in terms of the environment more broadly. So that's what we're going to seek to set out in the consultation, is how we can try and transition people away, because people that are in fuel poverty are often heating with just one room with regards to fossil fuels and stuff like that. So we'll try to set that out, but we do have obligations to improve the air quality, and I'm very conscious of that.
Did you want to come in with another little one, Aoife?
I just wanted to come in very quickly, and again, you probably covered this whenever I was out of the room, but just in terms of SORPI, my understanding is that there has been positive collaborative working with the Infrastructure Minister, and that I think it has been agreed that a phased approach would be taken. And I think you had mentioned in my absence about a special deal. And I get that phrase, but there, we have to accept the fact that the infrastructure doesn't exist as a result, of austerity measures that have been here for over a decade, and we can't get away from that. So I just would be interested in you elaborating a wee bit on the collaborative work that you have done with the Infrastructure Minister.
No problem. Look, we came early, so it's fine.
That's
no
okay.
problem.
No problem.
So look, it is a special arrangement because no one else has a special deal like that. Okay, there has been constructive engagement with the Infrastructure Minister in order to enable us to have an orderly withdrawal from SORPI, and I want to thank Liz for her engagement in relation to that. And since that's been agreed, it's sat at the executive, but it has not appeared on the agenda for decision. And that's my frustration, because when you engage collaboratively and you discuss things and you try to resolve things, then that's how we make politics work in Northern Ireland. And I think that's what we need to try to see in terms of the other side of the house, in terms of coming to the table and working to agree that. There is another paper in relation to special designation in Belfast Lough, and that is also a legal requirement. I met the Infrastructure Minister recently in regards to that. I know she's going to come back to me on that, but we do need to make that designation because it is a legal requirement as a result of a review. The issue in relation to wastewater pollution, this is on the agenda for the Office of Environmental Protection. It's on my agenda because in terms of us meeting our legal obligations in relation to environmental law, we've got to do that. And what I am doing is I'm seeking to highlight to people that what we're seeing back in terms of the Office of Environmental Protection's report last week, in terms of the Environmental Improvement Plan, that wastewater pollution is a serious concern for me, and we do need to have a twin-track process, which is we're working with the farming community and to enable the better management of nutrients on farm, but we also need to deal with those pressures in relation to wastewater. I know there's discussions at Hillsborough today, but I'm also saying that in terms of that investment, we need to be courageous in terms of facing up to the need to invest in that infrastructure.
Thank you, and thanks for letting me back in.
No problem, thank you. Apologies, I wasn't here to welcome you, and you're in good hands with the Vice Chair, Declan. I have a couple of questions for you in the last sort of 10 minutes, if that's okay, and forgive me if you've covered this ground, but I think it's really important. The announcement of the consultation on that was welcomed by, I'm sure, every one of us, but we have a history to learn from here, and I'm going to touch on that history, if you don't mind, Minister, because the change in behaviour will only come through confidence and relationship. So I'm going to go back to two things, if you don't mind. There was a vote of no confidence in the department in relation to the previous NAP, and then we also had the independent review of AFBI, and these two things have happened perhaps since the initial NAP and now to this one. How confident are you in regard to those relationships and the building up of that confidence that's required to move everybody into that change in behaviour? And now that the consultation's out, what will the department do to ensure that those relationships, particularly with the food producing sector, are maintained so that we can actually see delivery of that NAP?
Yeah. If anyone sees my diary, you'll see that I invest an awful lot in relationships and engaging with people. And it's fundamental that we work together on these issues. We consulted in relation to the Nutrients Action Programme last year. We had a legal duty to do that. We had to set out the proposals, but I was always clear, and this is the way I deal with life. These is a consultation, these are proposals. If you've got other ideas, come back to us on it. And it does show that it was a genuine consultation from what we've set out this week. And also respecting that process in relation to stakeholders and what they've done around that. We could talk words, Robbie, but actions matter. So in terms of Sustainable Farm Investment Scheme, in terms of £49 million in shared island funding, in terms of that on-farm advice and that support in relation to nature-based solutions, they're practical actions that we're delivering on the ground. The Sustainable Agriculture Programme and the schemes that we're delivering associated with that. So that is there. In relation to AFBI, and I don't think we shouldn't conflate two issues in regards to this, I met with the board of AFBI yesterday, and I want to commend them for the leadership under the chairperson of Grace in terms of dealing with these issues. AFBI is absolutely critical to the future, not just of agri-food, but also our environment and also in terms of our marine industry around this. And do you want to say a bit more around this? But I thought it was a constructive meeting.
It was very constructive, to be fair to the board. I think they have very clearly grasped all of the issues, whether it was the data breach last year, whether it was the allegations, not all as they turned out to be as accurate as suggested on the Hillsborough farm, the issues around the health and safety executive report, which I know the committee's been briefed on, and to be absolutely fair, the board has seized all of them and is driving a programme of actions. I'm waiting for an updated action plan because I want to see really clearly exactly what is being done, who's doing it, when is it going to be done by, so that we can actually track the progress. But I have to say the board has been really, really strong, and it's
I don't disagree with you in regard to the need for AFBI are central to this, because it's the science and data that we need, but again it's that confidence in the relationships with those that will implement the findings of that, and that those are food producers. In regards to this then, and you're right in terms of there's some fiscal support and there's things, but and it's already been touched on, but the principle of betterment was something that we had pitched out probably about a year ago in regard to that. Is the department in this space where that is something that they're going to be investing in and rolling out to ensure that we can break that logjam that is paralysing the useful planning application, shall we say?
Yeah, so thanks for facilitating us a wee bit earlier today, and I think that dealt with all this with Tom around it all. But we need to look at nutrients in the round, and the issue around ammonia is really, really critical. So we're trying to find a way forward where we have a strategic reduction of ammonia across Northern Ireland. And then in that context, if it's like-for-like replacement, we have that strategic ammonia reduction programme, and we have a better environmental footprint, that those applications can be better considered in the time ahead. But we need to make sure we're doing this legally robust and in terms of proper process, and engagement with stakeholders, whether it's the Ulster Farmers Union, Northern Environment Link, has been robust. Okay, but it's been constructive, and that's hopefully getting us into a landing zone in regards to this. Can I say that these issues that we're talking about have bedeviled agriculture for approximately a decade? So for us to be able to find a way through this is really, really significant, and that's by us respecting the science, but also officials working constructively with stakeholders.
No problem. And you'd be aware, you may even be attending the talks at some stage. There are talks going on in Hillsborough at the moment in and around budgets and stuff. So budgets are critical to every single department, including your own. Minister, do you want to give us an outline in regard to any forecasting that you're doing in regard to the needs of DAERA over this next 5 to 10 years? Because everything that we're talking about today, the delivery of that, it will roll out over the next couple of years.
These aspects of budget, which are resource and capital, a multi-year budget is absolutely critical for us to allow us to plan, but also to give those organisations outside, including our farming community, that confidence. Particularly in relation to capital, we have an ageing infrastructure. If anyone goes to see some of our facilities, they do need to be replaced. And that's why we need the multi-year budget, so we can give confidence in terms of the work taking place. Katrina can set this out a bit more, but can I say to you, the fact that we don't have a budget, it concerns me greatly. It is not normal, it is not acceptable, and we need to have a budget in place, and that requires the UK government to step up and properly fund us in line with what our colleagues in Scotland and Wales get.
Yeah, and just to add, from an accounting officer perspective, it is really, really difficult to try and work out, what a budget might be when you don't have one. So we have been looking internally constantly at the projections for this year. Capital, as the Minister said, is exceptionally difficult, Chair. Really, a big gap between what I would consider was our minimum need and what we actually have in the contingency planning envelope. So it is not easy. Hopefully ministers and parties will come back from Hillsborough with some better results for accounting officers. But even just trying to map through to the end of this year is a challenge. Never mind, as you're absolutely right to say, looking ahead to the needs of the environment, farming, the agri-food sector and rural communities over the next 3, 5, 10 years.
Yeah, no, I get that. I think that correct me if I'm wrong, please, Katrina. If there's no budget agreed, the maximum next year that can be spent is 95% of the
maximum. If there is no budget agreed imminently, then under the legislation, as I understand it, the Permanent Secretary in the Department of Finance can take a step that will allow 95%, but it is not 95% of the budget. It is, and there are caveats. So, for example, accrued resources aren't available to us, so it would be very difficult. And I think there needs to be the understanding that budget really isn't just a paper exercise. There is a point at which cash becomes rather crucial.
No, I can see where the failure to be invest in capital, particularly in areas like AFBI, where then the service delivery then suffers if you don't have the appropriate buildings, equipment and resource. And the final one for me then is in and around the vacancies, not just in the department, but the arm's length bodies as well, which are hampering productivity and delivery. Is there any light at the end of the tunnel in regard to that?
Yeah, I'll let Katrina come in, but can I just say in terms of discussion around budget, often the view is that we need to cut the size of the civil service. Can I say to you that we have responsibilities, not just to our farming community, but also to our environment? If you reduce the headcount of this department, you will reduce the delivery and potentially result in more investigations from the Office of Environmental Protection. And there's some analysis done that since 2018, if you exclude Windsor Framework, which is obviously additional responsibility that came along, there's been no significant increase in the headcount of the department. So that highlights why those vacancies are absolutely critical, because if we want things done, we need people to do it. Katrina could probably outline that, but this is a big issue for us.
It's a big challenge for us. I mean, the nature of our business is that, we need people to enforce, we need people to deliver public services, we need people to advise ministers, but most of our staff are out on the front line, whether they're involved in testing cattle or timber production or whatever it is. On the good news point, as things stand, I think I have something around the region of 220 people who have either got a firm start date confirmed or an offer that I'm hoping they're accepting to come and join us, so that is a relief. We have we've had in the past particular challenge with veterinary officers. We have something nearly 50 people successful in the most recent competition, which is great. Doesn't mean I don't still have a load of vacancies to fill, and we have our own frustrations around we get supply and then we exhaust it and then we have to wait for the next competition to come around before we can fill it. I've got about 20% of vacancies in areas that are specifically related to the Windsor framework, fluctuates between 20 and 25%, and the additional responsibilities that we have there, and the committee might have seen that we've just been given some further new ones as competent authority for EU deforestation regulation. So that challenge doesn't change. You stabilise teams that are waiting for vacancies, and then there's new functions and you have to go around it all over again. But some positives, but still a lot to go.
I think this is one of the committees, Minister, to be fair, that would absolutely agree with you in terms of the delivery of the DAERA officials is absolutely critical, because it's so intrinsic to some of those environmental and food security needs that we all probably agree on. I'm just going to let the Deputy Chair just take us out then with a wee one as well, as Willie Irwin, God bless him, would have said, just a wee one. Declan.
Actually speaking, I haven't been offered to ask a question yet, Chair.
Oh, actually, I'm not buying that one. I'm not buying that one.
Chair, obviously we'll be covering questions around agriculture, environment, but rural affairs. I note on the interim business plan there's a commitment date of March 2027, 31st of March 2027 for a new rural policy, whenever we're all off and the mandate's completed and we're in PERDA. We haven't had a rural development programme as such since the EU rural development programme, apart from support from the COVID small settlement scheme. So what's your thinking, what support will the department provide going forward to the end of the mandate for rural communities, rural community organisations in terms of basic services and support on the ground in rural communities?
Keep it really brief, because officials are probably, I think, are coming in today to brief in regards to this. That deadline is essentially to deliver it in this financial year. We would like to do it much earlier. It requires executive approval, so I would hope that occurs, but the history is that papers in the executive do take a while to get turned around. We'd hope to get that agreed, and that's also given a signal that all government departments need to have responsibility for rural communities and step up to that, and that would allow us to be able to move forward in that, but officials will take you through that, I think.
Yes, I think they're doing today.
And just the shipping places meeting that we attended with the Department of Communities, the 150 million going forward, 50 million was from DAERA for the next 10 years. Now, there's a bit of an alarm bell went off with me at that joint meeting, because a lot of the emphasis was on high streets and commerce, but a lot of the small settlements that we represent across West Row and other places don't have high streets, never mind commerce in them. So we just need assurance from the department going forward that dispersed rural settlements, particularly for services and community infrastructure, will be a big part in terms of the DAERA's contribution to that pot.
Yeah. I guess a legitimate point, Declan. If you're okay, what we'll do is we'll take that away and we'll engage with officials and write back, because it is a legitimate point that in terms of rural communities they don't have a large high street, and that fundamentally is one or two shops that hold that community together. Yep. We'll come back to you on that. Is that okay?
Thank you.
Yeah, just to add by way of reassurance is that our contribution will most definitely be directed towards those small settlements, 5,000 or smaller.
Okay, Trish. Thank you so much. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you,
Katrina. Have a nice summer.
Have a good summer, everyone.
Right. Members, thank you very much for your indulgence this morning. Thank you, Declan, for taking the chair at the start of that item of business. So we're now on agenda item 3, which is chairperson's business. So, chairperson's business 1, 2, 3 and 4. I'm going to take chairperson's business in that, as they all refer to the same matter. It's 1, 2, 3 and 4. So, we referred to the pack, starting at page 7, to a series of correspondence from the Countryside Alliance, CAI, regarding the structure and framing of our call for evidence on the Hunting with Dogs Bill, and the most recent letter sent to them by the Chair is the first letter starting at page 7. Members will recall we considered the matter last week and were content with the Clerk's response to the first correspondence, which was dated the 19th of June. We also noted that the Clerk received a further email and a telephone call from the Countryside Alliance and had sought guidance from the Clerk Assistants. We agreed that the Clerk would wait for advice from the Clerk Assistants before considering any further response. So based on evidence, now refer to page 4 of table papers for a draft response for our agreement. It clarifies a number of matters raised by the CAI. So members, firstly, I want to give you a second or two just in terms of that table papers item, if you don't mind, just to make sure that you have it there in front of you. Okay. So members all got that up on your screens and had time to look at that. So members, are you content that the Clerk issues the drafted response to CAI on behalf of the committee? First of all.
Yeah.
Yeah. And secondly, are you content that the Clerk requests legal advice on our behalf from the Assembly Legal Service?
Yep.
Yep. Agreed, members?
Yes.
Okay.
Can I make a comment?
Yes, John.
A brief comment before I do it. I want to just say that I am very mindful of the effort required to take any bill through this committee and the additional resource that's required and the effort required from our officials, and I'm very grateful for that in relation to my bill in particular, but of course all of the other bills as well. I'm going to make a comment this morning, just put it out there, and it's a theme I'm going to return to, so I'm probably going to be repeating this comment periodically or more often even over the next number of months. It strikes me very clearly, and this needs to be on public record, that there are those like this organisation who are opposed to what I'm doing, who support the killing of wild mammals for human entertainment, and they will talk about anything, absolutely anything. Policy, process, examples of behaviour, anything other than fox hunting and the killing of wild mammals using dogs. And the correspondence in front of me today and on previous occasions is proof that these people will discuss anything other than the issue at hand.
Thank you, John. And when they get, when CAA get the response, they obviously, like everyone else out there, will have the opportunity to provide evidence to
Absolutely.
the committee as per. I mean, this is a normal process which we're doing. There's nothing different in what we're doing. So I mean, the response outlines that. So if they want to respond, which I'm sure they will have the opportunity to do so.
I'll be returning to that point.
Yes.
I suspect repeatedly.
Chair, they have been given a date for oral evidence on the 24th of September. So.
Okay, cool. 24th of September is the date for oral evidence for them. So, okay, members. Okay, thank you, members. Thank you, John.
Chair, can I just clarify, as this is our last meeting, you're content that I just draft
Yes.
legal,
Yes.
the query for the legal services without it coming back to committee?
Yeah, members are content with that. So we've already discharged responsibility, just from my understanding, to the clerk to draft the letter for seeking legal advice on the letter that we received. Members content with that? We don't need to come back to it. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, members.
And Chair, I'm not going to fall out with John, but I don't just accept the analysis that he put forward with regards to the Countryside Alliance. But that's for another day, not for today. But happy enough with the action the committee's taken.
Not a
I
problem.
expressed an opinion. I didn't suggest for a moment it was the opinion of the entire
No, it's not.
committee.
It's definitely no. It's not. No.
But like others, I have the right to have my voice heard.
Yes, no, I agree, and I imagine throughout the deliberations of this bill, we'll hear lots of opinions on each side of the argument, and that's what this is for. This is what the committee's for. It's for people to share their opinions.
Proof of the pudding.
Absolutely.
Wait and see.
Okay, members. Item number 5. I'm seeking the committee's agreement to forward the areas of natural constraint payments bill and the hunting with dogs bill to the examiner of statutory rules for our advice on the delegated powers. I know the two members will have declared their interest in that at the start of the meeting.
Declare just
Declan didn't, he's done it.
See, that's why I'm here to remind you. All right. If you're relying on me, Declan, oh dear, love you. Okay, item number 6, members. I refer you to table papers starting at page 7 for correspondence from the Department on 2 pieces of marine policy guidance to support the implementation of the Environmental Improvement Plan for Northern Ireland. The first document of Annex A is the guidance on the making of bylaws under Part 3 of the Marine Act, NI 2013. It explains how the Department intends to use its existing bylaw making powers to manage activities that may pose risks to protected features within MPAs. The second document at Annex B is the draft guidance on the use of fixed monetary penalties in marine protected areas, which sets out how the Department proposes to apply proportionate civil sanctions for low-level breaches of Marine Act bylaws. An 8-week public consultation will be undertaken. This correspondence was issued to the clerk yesterday afternoon and has only been accepted for tabling due to this being the last meeting before recess, members. The consultation is to be launched tomorrow, so I presume officials must have known about it for some time. Okay, members, item number 7 then. Before I move on to matters arising, there are several housekeeping items regarding recess that I will now cover. First one is freedom of information. It is standard practice to delegate authority to the chairperson and the deputy chairperson during periods of recess to submit views on the releasing or withholding of information in any non-routine or contentious freedom of information requests received by the committee, and that any such views expressed would be brought to the attention of the committee at the first meeting after summer recess. So where members agree to delegate this authority to chairperson and deputy chairperson.
Yeah, I think we'll trust you in that.
Thank you. We'll have to go on joint holidays, Declan, just so we know. So we've got a quick comms. We'll swap dates after, will we? Okay, correspondence, members. The committee team will continue to receive correspondence from stakeholders over the summer period. It is standard practice that the committee team includes such items for consideration at the committee's first meeting of the new session in September 2026. However, it's up to each committee whether they wish to agree any urgent matters via correspondence, and any such action would be noted in the first meeting after recess. So are members agree to address any urgent matters by correspondence during recess? Okay, members, thank you. In the forward work programme, members, as this is the last meeting, there's no forward work programme in the pack this week, and it will be revised after the summer recess. Members content? Yep. Okay, minutes of the proceedings. And again, as this is the last meeting before recess, the minutes of today's meeting will be signed off as usual at the next formal meeting of the committee, which will be in September. Members content? Yep. Okay, agenda item 4 then, minutes of the meeting on 25th of June. Members are referred to pack at page 25 for the draft minutes of our meeting which was held on the 25th of June. Have you any comments? Are you content with the minutes as drafted? If so, I'll sign them for publishing on the website. Okay, agenda item 5, matters arising. Item number 1 refers to page 39 of the pack to response from the Department dated 26th of June regarding our queries regarding the peatland strategy delivery plan. That's for April 26th to December 2027. Members will recall at our meeting on the 5th of June we discussed our visit to Ancraigan and the nearby peatland restoration, where we observed areas of pine forest to be felled in order to return the land to bog habitat. We then agreed to write to the Department for clarification on some matters. We asked how does the Department quantify deforestation associated with peatland restoration when existing forestry is removed to restore bogland. The Department states that proposed forest to bog restoration projects are informed by the UK's Forest Research Agency, providing analysis and guidance on the carbon storage potential for restored peatland relative to carbon capture and storage of forestry land use. The peatland restoration will continue to focus on afforested peatland sites with low productivity, where the potential for carbon capture and storage is greater through peatland restoration, and also on restoration of degraded open habitat peatlands on its estate. We also know how this is accounted for within. We also asked how this is accounted for within Northern Ireland's afforestation and woodland creation targets. The Department states that areas deforested to contribute to peatland restoration reduce the hectares of woodland that meet the criteria for inclusion in NI Woodland Register. The removed woodlands therefore need to be replaced as a component of extending our forest cover to 12% by 2050 from the current level of 8.6%. This one was of particular note to me because I know that unfortunately it looks likely we could miss the 2030 target, and that's without factoring in the deforestation of these areas. But I suppose I understand the science and the data behind it, but I think we need to assist and keep the Department sharp just on the fact that when they're deforesting, they need to afforest at a more significant rate. So members content to note that, and we'll keep an eye on it going forward. Yep. Thank you, members. I refer to page 43 of the pack to correspondence from the Department dated 26th of June, providing information on the legislation and operation requirements that set out to support the District Council's role in achieving air quality objectives. Members will recall that this was queried at the briefing on the draft air quality amendment regulations 2026 on the 20th of May when we agreed to support the SR. That's the wood burning stove there, Gareth. The response states that there is a shared responsibility for air quality between the Department and councils, with DAERA overseeing ambient air quality and regulatory compliance under the Air Quality Standard Regulations Northern Ireland 2010, and councils are responsible for local assessment and review under the Environment Order 2002. The Department provides grant funding to support the council's work for monitoring staff cost, network expansion and awareness, while councils fund part of the cost and manage day-to-day monitoring operations. The response also states that councils must regularly review air quality and statutory objectives in the Air Quality Regulations No. 2003 and report annually, and where demands are not met, designate an air quality management area and produce department-approved action plan. The AQMA can only be revoked following robust evidence that air quality objectives have been achieved with DAERA approval required. Have you any comments you content to note? Thank you, members. Okay, matters rise number 3 referred to page 46 to correspondence from the department dated 26th of June providing information regarding the veterinary inspector's pay and grading dispute. Members will note that we wrote to the Minister, but the response came through DALO. This was an error, but the clerk has checked and the Minister has cleared the response. If the clerk had sent it back for reissue, we would not have received it at this meeting. We were briefed by NIPSA on 11th of June and raised concerns regarding the prolonged handling of this issue, including delays in undertaking a job evaluation exercise and an alleged failure to follow NICS protocols. We noted the impact on staff morale, recruitment and retention and the wider operational risks arising from the dispute, including the potential impact on food security, animal health, animal welfare. We also had concerns regarding the apparent lack of progress during the recent period between 26th of March 2026 and the 18th of May 2026. The Department's response states it regrets that the action has taken place and is committed to following the NICS HR policies and procedures regarding the grading of posts. In relation to timeline leading up to industrial action, the Department has provided the timeline from the commencement of the job evaluation and grading exercise in October 2023 through to 20th of April 2026, when NIPSA notified the Department of the outcome of its ballot, and the nature and timeline of the industrial action commencing on the 1st of May 2026. In relation to the nature and frequency of engagement with NIPSA, the Department wrote to NIPSA on the 18th of May 2026 following the ballot outcome, outlining its position, considering implications, including the Department of Finance, and reaffirming a commitment to constructive engagement. It also rejects claims of a lack of engagement, noting ongoing consideration and earlier correspondence in January 2026. Further meetings with NIPSA have since taken place on the 1st of June, 18th of June, with another scheduled for today, and ongoing contact has been maintained between meetings. In relation to the NICS job evaluation grading process, the Department states the previous job evaluation grading exercise was conducted in 2015 and in 2018, which led to the creation of a new entry 6th grade at deputy principal level in 2017-2018. This included full engagement and consultation with NIPSA. A complete record of the 2015-2017-18 grading process is not available, as records were disposed of in accordance with NICS retention and disposal policy. However, a review of the grading process with what the Department believes to be sufficient records found the process was compliant with HR policies. Have you any further comments on this matter? Are you content to note and forward the reply to NIPSA officials? One that occurs to me, and I understand the pinch point here for the Department to an extent with the grading work that was done in 2015 and 2018. And 2018 might not seem like a long time ago, but the world is moving incredibly fast with the pressure on attracting suitable candidates into the public service. Where it used to be easier, it's much more difficult now. I'm not indicating any committee position on that. I just think it's a very interesting dynamic, that something I would certainly be keeping myself aware of in regards to any any talks we have with NIPSA in this space. It was good to get from the Permanent Secretary today there seems to be a reasonably significant interest in filling posts, and obviously if those posts are filled it helps alleviate the backlog and the pressures that are on there. But I imagine we'll just keep a watching brief on this, guys, and I'm sure NIPSA will inform us in due time of the ongoing talks, and as I said in the brief there are talks today. Members content? Okay, thank you, members. Item number 4, last week we considered a response from the Department dated the 19th of June regarding the queries we raised related to the reported destruction within the Sperrin area of outstanding natural beauty and the special area of conservation at Bonds Glen. Members content that we share the Department's response with the Bonds Glen group? Yeah. Thank you, members. Item number 5, on the 18th of June we were briefed by officials on the agriculture student fees amendment regulations, and I now refer to page 8 of the table of papers. The response from the Department dated the 30th of June on the issues we raised regarding the optimum capacity of CAFRE and details on the DAERA's Children's Champion and the CAFRE Care Experience Bursary, which I found really interesting. In relation to the optimum capacity, CAFRE is consistently meeting enrolment targets of 1,850, averaging 1,865 over the last 5 years. The CAFRE strategic plan has a target of 2,500 student enrolments by 2030, but this will be subject to ensuring the appropriate complement of staff, and I am sure there are budgetary implications in regard to that. In relation to the DAERA Children's Champion, this role is fulfilled by a senior policy official and includes representation at groups promoting the rights of children and young people, including the Northern Ireland Commissioner for Children and Young People, the Children's Champion Forum, Nicky Children and Young People's Participation Forum, and the cross-departmental group on Youth Services. The correspondence also provides detail on access to and the promotion of the CAFRE Care Experience Bursary and other financial support, including the CAFRE Hardship Fund, to support care experience students undertaking higher education courses at CAFRE. I'll certainly have another look at that to make sure that it's been promulgated appropriately, because it sounds like a very useful policy. Any other comments you can tend to note, members?
Nope.
Okay. I refer you to table paper starting at page 12, the notification from the Department dated the 30th of June. The consultation response summary for the draft waste management strategy will be provided for the committee by the end of the summer. The Department will provide a briefing following recess. Have you any comments you can tend to note, members? Okay. Item number 7 then, refer you to table paper starting at page 14, the correspondence from the Department dated 29th of June regarding the launch tomorrow of the 12-week public consultation of the potential wildlife intervention option as part of the bovine tuberculosis in Northern Ireland blueprint for eradication. Please note the consultation document starting at page 19 of table papers is embargoed, members, until the 3rd of July. The consultation will invite views on a range of potential wildlife intervention options and associated delivery mechanisms, and the Department will provide an update on the outcome of the consultation and next steps in due course. Any comments you can tend to note? Okay, members, thank you. We've already disposed of item number 7. 6. So we're now moving to agenda item 7. Okay, so this is a departmental all evidence session, briefing policy intention, generational renewal response in the Farming for Generations scheme. So members, I refer you to the pack starting on page 85 to the briefing paper providing an update on the development of the generational renewal policy response in the Farming for Generations scheme. Now welcome the following officials to brief the committee and answer any questions we have. 1, 2, 3. Yes, Paul McHenry, Director of CAFRE, George Moffitt, Acting Director, Agricultural Policy Division, Mark Scott, Head of College Support Services at CAFRE. Thank you very much, gentlemen. You're more than welcome to the committee, and please feel free to brief.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to provide the committee with this briefing on the Department's plans to introduce a Farming for the Generations scheme. This scheme aims to support generational renewal across Northern Ireland's farming sector. Generational renewal is a core element of the Sustainable Agriculture Programme. It is about ensuring that farm businesses can transition successfully from one generation to the next, and that responsibility, knowledge and decision making pass to a successor in a planned and sustainable way. Generational renewal remains a significant structural issue, with many farm businesses not having yet engaged in meaningful succession planning, and this has implications for productivity, sustainability and long-term resilience within the sector. To inform the development of this scheme, DAERA introduced a pilot scheme which ran from October 24 through to March of this year. This pilot, alongside a review of the Young Farmers Payment, has provided a strong evidence base for the approach now being proposed. They show that financial support on its own is not sufficient to drive generational change and is most effective when combined with structural engagement and advice. The pilot demonstrated that structural support can accelerate progress, helping families take steps that would otherwise have been delayed. It also highlighted the importance of engaging with the lead generation and supporting the whole family through what is often a gradual process. Combined with this evidence, the scheme has been shaped through a strong co-designed approach. We have worked closely with a co-design group representing a wide range of stakeholders. This includes the Ulster Farmers Union, the Young Farmers Clubs of Ulster, the banking sector, the Agriculture Law Association, NIAPA, Northern Ireland Environmental Link and the Royal Countryside Fund. We have also engaged with the Agricultural Policy Stakeholder Group to ensure wider sector input. Feedback has been very positive, with clear support for current planning. Co-design and consultation has also been invaluable. We are here today to outline our current planning, and we very much welcome the views of the committee on these proposals. I'll now ask my colleague, Mark Scott, to take members through the detail of the proposed scheme.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to provide the committee with an overview of the proposed Farming for the Generation scheme. The scheme is designed to encourage farm businesses to engage in succession planning earlier and to provide practical support at each stage. It's been developed to help farm businesses regardless of their starting point, recognising that succession develops over a period of time. Support will be delivered through a combination of awareness raising, training, mentoring, professional advice and targeted financial assistance. The aim is to increase resilience, sustainability and competitiveness of farm businesses while also helping the next generation to take a more active role. So I'm going to run through the scheme structure, and I'll refer you to, if you have it, to the schematic diagram that is in your briefing paper. The scheme begins with a sector-wide awareness campaign which is targeted at all farm businesses across Northern Ireland, including those who may not yet be ready to engage directly with the scheme. Its purpose is to encourage earlier consideration of succession planning, raise awareness of the support available, and help normalise what can often be difficult conversations about the future of the family farm. We recognise that for many families, simply starting that conversation is the most difficult step. Even where businesses do not engage immediately, they will still benefit from increased awareness, clearer information, and signposting to support when they are ready. The scheme has a pathway-based approach, recognising that farm businesses are at different stages in their succession journey and require different approaches. It's built around 3 connected pathways: the land mobility pathway, the succession pathway, and the young farmers pathway. These operate together as a single integrated scheme, which allows farm businesses to navigate through the scheme based on their individual circumstances and needs. So I'll take the pathways each now in turn. The land mobility pathway is for farm businesses that do not currently have a successor identified. The land mobility pathway provides an entry point into the scheme for those businesses. Its purpose is to help those businesses consider their future options. This could include opportunities such as long-term leasing, profit share arrangements, contract rearing, sharing of resources, or succession planning arrangements. The overall aim is to ensure that businesses without a successor are not excluded and that they continue to have access to clear and practical routes for the future of the farm. The land mobility pathway is also the point of access to the scheme for new entrants to agriculture seeking opportunities. So moving on to the succession pathway, where a successor has been identified regardless of the age, or once that successor has been identified through the land mobility pathway, the farm businesses move into the succession pathway. This is the core and mandatory element of the scheme. It supports farm families to move from informal or delayed discussions towards clear and practical succession planning. Through this pathway, farm businesses will have access to succession planning workshops, a farm business review, training aligned with the future sustainability requirements and the Sustainable Agriculture Programme, one-to-one mentoring, professional, legal and financial advice, and assistance where changes to the business structures may be required. The aim here is to help families make informed decisions about the future of the farm and to provide practical assistance to put those decisions into effect. So then finally, the young farmers pathway. Through this pathway, farm businesses with a younger successor can avail of additional financial support. It is targeted at businesses where the successor is aged between 18 and 40, is formally involved in the farm business and is progressing towards an active role in management. Incentive payments will be linked to progression and issued in stages as annual milestones are achieved over the 4-year pathway for young farmers. This pathway begins with the farm businesses meeting the eligibility requirements and completing the initial Year 1 succession planning and Sustainable Agriculture Programme workshops, which in turn will trigger the first milestone payment. The proposed eligibility criteria for the Young Farmers Pathway is that the successor would be named on a Category 1 DAERA Farm Business ID, be aged between 18 and 40, and hold a minimum Level 2 qualification in agriculture or horticulture. So just to note at this point on the qualification that subject to approval of the scheme and launch for those who meet the criteria but have not yet obtained a Level 2 qualification, that enrolling on the CAFRE Level 2 Agricultural Business Operations 2026 intake will ensure eligibility for applications to the first year of the scheme. We're currently taking legal advice on how best to ensure that individuals at the upper age limit who may have been affected by the transition between schemes are not disadvantaged. In Year 2, farm business development training for the successor to support effective farm business planning and management will trigger the milestone incentive payment. And in Year 3, participation in further learning and knowledge transfer activities will trigger that payment. The enhanced final milestone payment in Year 4 is activated once the successor is fully integrated into the business. This includes their active involvement in management decisions, financial planning and day-to-day operations. Overall, the proposed approach is designed to encourage meaningful engagement over time rather than short-term participation. So in summary, the overall objective is to encourage and support succession to happen earlier in a more structured way and to enable stronger and more sustainable farm businesses over time. The scheme will enable participants to begin succession discussions earlier, access mentoring and professional advice, make informed decisions about the future of the business and support the next generation in taking on a more active role. Through the combination of the awareness campaign and the pathway-based approach, the scheme is designed to ensure that support is available across the sector, regardless of where the farm businesses are in their succession journey.
Okay. Thank you, Mark. What we have set out today is a scheme that is evidence-based, developed through very close collaboration with industry and focused on supporting long-term behavioural change and how generation renewal is approached across Northern Ireland. In terms of next steps, the scheme is now moving through the formal approval process and working towards bringing the scheme forward later this year. I trust you have found this overview helpful and are interested in the views of the committee on these proposals and welcome any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Gentlemen, this is a really nice topic to get on our potentially our last session before we break for recess. It's obviously an evident and very visible pressure across the farming fraternity. But is there any instances of global best practice? I know that it's noted in the Republic and some schemes that have been developed there, but this has been a problem which has obviously been an issue for many generations. Is there any global best practice that where someone seems to have got something just right?
Okay. Well, I suppose in the developing up of this programme, we have looked across both ROI and what has been happening across both the rest of the UK and also across Europe, which has helped to inform the development of this scheme. And Mark will maybe provide some of the highlights of what we've seen from across all the regions. So.
I suppose our nearest neighbours are those that are facing the same structural issues. So we have focused clearly on looking at the Republic of Ireland across the EU and the UK. So Ireland currently supports generational renewal through young farmer payments, the National Reserve, capital grants, succession advice grants and collaborative farming grants and a range of taxation measures. Ireland's Commission on Generational Renewal concluded that succession requires support for both incoming and outgoing generations. And the key recommendations that Commission have provided for the Republic are increasing the funding for generational renewal from 3% of the budget to at least 8%, introducing establishment grants for young farmers, payment support for farm transfer, land mobility initiatives, increasing access to finance and embedding succession planning and training and advisory services. And we've looked at all of those things through our co-design process and addressed those. Across Europe, the same structural issues are there. Governments are increasingly moving beyond young farmer payments towards integrated approaches, as this is, covering succession, retirement, land mobility, training, finance and advisory support. So we have looked across the UK regions, the Republic, our nearest neighbour, and across the EU.
I get that it's kind of difficult too because we have but certainly it's distinct from maybe GB where they've got a lot of tenant farmers as opposed to family farms. Mm-hmm. Is there a risk at any stage, and will it be monitored, that we don't turn into a country of tenant farmers, and that this is geared towards trying to protect that? Because I think it's a qualitative piece in terms of that family farm piece. You only get that relief from the pride from the intergenerational pieces. Is that something that's identified as a risk, perhaps, as part of the policy?
Yeah, well, I suppose the key thing with this programme was bringing that next generation into the existing farm businesses and the farm structures that we have there. So it's about supporting those people to come into the existing businesses that exist, really.
Okay. One of the probably one of the things that maybe unfairly would have leveraged this was, I think, the inheritance tax piece. It started to shift the focus of that intergenerational, what you do with your farm at a time, maybe when you're thinking that your most of your days have gone and so on. Was it of any use in the discussions in the build-up of this? Because there's still obviously an element of inheritance tax in there, but because it's a fixed fiscal number, with the land price going up, the price of food, stock, fuel, and all of those things going up, it brings into scope, I suppose, more and more farms.
Even raised awareness of the need for succession planning and the need for that to happen earlier. So it was around raising awareness and the need for this type of programme. So, it's been a catalyst to help support what we are planning to do here from that aspect.
A final one from me before I bring in the Vice Chair. The land mobility piece. So we had heard from the Young Farmers Clubs who were in with us maybe about 6 or 9 months ago, and they were very keen. So obviously it's great to see it on paper there in regard to it. Will they remain to be more? I think they're going to be more than a stakeholder in this. Do you want to flesh out how that works?
Okay. Well, I suppose the business case around that's still being developed. All I suppose I can say at this stage is that was part of the feedback that we also received as part of the co-design group, that moving forward, that there needs to be that greater integration with the wider industry and supporting the delivery of that. That may well be, the likes of working close with the likes of the young farmers and others.
Yes,
I have to say, but we have taken that on board.
And then the finance piece is my final. Obviously, it's business case subject to approval. What's the projected costs? Have you got projected costs over 5 years, for instance?
We have, but they're not yet approved.
Okay.
As the challenge with that. But we have very much taken on board the previous Young Farmers Scheme, and also looked to see what, in terms of the incentive, what that would need to be to actually drive that generational change. So that has been brought in, but I'm not really in a position to share the actual overall cost of the programme. But just to reassure you that, it will be included in incentive payment as part of the package.
Understand. Thank you for that. Okay, Declan.
Chair, thank you for that, man. And I welcome this here. I think that with the average age of farmers being 59 here in the north, I think it's important that we do incentivise the younger generation to come in to farming in a leadership role. Again, I should declare an interest as a executor and owner of a small farm myself, and I actually did that level 2 qualification myself a few years ago, so I can highly commend it. So I can. It's a very good course through CAFRI. I suppose the one thing that I feel can potentially undermine this, particularly for the succession pathway or the land mobility pathway, is the lack of new entitlements. The closure of the regional reserve has made it really difficult, and I've been contacted by many young farmers who are new into the scheme, who aren't from a farming family but have had the opportunity to farm, and they can't get entitlements. And in the assembly question I did to DAERA there recently, I have found out that there's 60,000 additional hectares now eligible for single farm payment, and there isn't near enough entitlements to cover that. So I just have this feeling that unless there's a decision made to take another look at the ability of new entrants, young farmers, to get new entitlements of their own, rather than having to buy them of our farmer or lease them, that this could potentially undermine the scheme, which I very much welcome the scheme.
Okay. I suppose our element of it here is that there is, financial support to the farm business, and the business itself can then decide how they actually use that money, whether it's to actually buy additional entitlements. That's very much a management decision. But in terms of regional reserve, maybe I call upon George.
Yeah. No, thanks, Paul. And I know we've raised the point before, and both the previous Young Farmer Payment Scheme and Regional Reserve, as you know, were EU schemes. Having left the EU, we did have cover to keep those schemes going up until 2025, but that was the last year. Certainly on an annual basis, as you mentioned there is trade in entitlements, and entitlements do be transferred either through sale or lease. But on an annual basis, there's also a lot of entitlements that aren't activated. So there is capacity out there. And as Paul says, through this scheme, the financial support will be a business decision on how that money is used, be it to invest in new equipment within the business, potentially buy new entitlements or lease entitlements for a period of time. I think you mentioned the land eligibility, and yes, new land has come in. I suppose, as we said before, the reason for bringing that new land in was very much linked to simplifying the process for farm businesses, but also helping from an environmental point of view to avoid some of the practices that maybe farmers were taking to make land eligible. So it's just really helped on that basis.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And again, I don't want to be negative at all on this, because I do welcome this here, and I look forward to seeing what shape the young farmers pathway takes and the support that's available whenever it gets to that point. But I really do want just to please take note of the challenges for accessing entitlements, and this year in particular, the price of entitlements for leasing has went absolutely through the roof. Like there's people paying almost the full value or more than the value of the actual entitlements, and that has a hugely detrimental impact on a young farmer if they had to get entitlements and then have to pay a huge amount to lease them because there's such a shortage of them. So all I would just say is that I welcome the scheme, but please, if you have any influence in the department, to take a look at the issue of letting new entrants, new young farmers get their own new entitlements rather than have to chase somebody else to pay, in some cases, an extortionate rate for them.
Okay.
Just if I could just come in on that, so I suppose specifically through the co-design process and the co-design group proposed that delinking from entitlements for the payment was something that they felt was positive. So that came through co-design. It also means that this scheme is scale neutral. So a small farm or a smaller farm will have the same cost associated with bringing in a successor as a large farm. Will you link to entitlements any payment for young farmers? Well, then that's skewing towards disproportionate advantage to the larger farmers.
Listen, thanks very much for the briefing. That's very helpful, and it's great to see this progress.
Thank you. John?
Thank you. Thanks for the information. Two questions closely linked. Firstly, any element of this specifically targeted at women coming into farming?
I suppose again, the key aspect of this is that everybody will be able to, so there's no discrimination against any individuals, and the whole idea of getting everybody within the farm family around the table is that it hopefully will encourage that discussions. And also I suppose from a CAFRE perspective, if we look at the proportion of females actually now coming into the sector and within our programmes, particularly within our higher education programmes, there's actually now a greater proportion of females than males. So all that will hopefully hope to encourage more females into the sector.
Yep, and that's good news. Appreciate that. I guess then, before I ask the second question, any programmes or initiatives that are going to link in directly with women coming into farming could then feed into this? They could sort of check in with you on this as well then to make sure they're up to speed and accessing it. The second one is, I've had some, I don't have any details with me, I'm doing this from memory, so forgive me for any lapses. I have had some problems in the past where a young woman on a farm with her own portion of land, ideally that's what they wanted, running almost her own business to get the experience, was having problems with grant funding because she wasn't part of the overall farm business. Is there any mechanism by which somebody can be encouraged to do something bespoke by themselves for the business experience rather than just get into the main farm business?
Another key element of this would reference to level 2 agricultural business operations. So it's actually open to everybody. You won't have to be part of this Farming for the Generations programme to be part of that. So you can actually register and go through that programme independent of this.
Yeah, okay. On the family farmland, if you were doing your own business.
Oh, very much so. Anybody that programme's open to anybody to actually apply and go through that programme.
That's good, Mark. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, Chair. And just really a comment. I do support this policy is going forward, but I do have to agree with the Vice Chair here with regards to entitlements for young farmers who stand on their own feet. It's different for a young farmer who's coming forward and taking over as a successor from father or whatever. But for someone coming in new, and they're coming into farming, standing on their own merits in a sense, and they're going to be at a disadvantage because they don't have no entitlements. And I think On that sphere, then there should be, the department should look at some flexibility with regards to entitlements for someone in that position. It's different again, as I say, for someone who's taken over, a successor, but for someone who's seeking to start a farming business on their own merits and they have no entitlements, then I think there should be some flexibility somewhere within the department to allow entitlements for that particular person. And you did say earlier that there was quite a number of entitlements that were not activated. Have we any idea of what, or for many entitlements, or what percentage of entitlements isn't been activated right across our farming community in Northern Ireland?
It varies from year to year. I think in the current year there's probably in the region of 5,000 that haven't been activated. And I suppose just picking up on your other point, at the minute, there is no regional reserve or any base of entitlements are held centrally. A lot of the interaction and the transfer, the lease, the sale of entitlements is through the agents. The department isn't per se involved in, but certainly the encouragement would be for young farmers certainly to engage there and just see what's available if they're looking to try and acquire some or lease some, and that's available throughout the year.
Yeah, but I can testify from my own office that I have had young farmers onto our office looking for entitlements. They went through the agent or whatever. Maybe that they might have got some off a year before, but they can't get them. And as the Vice Chair said, they're going up through the roof, the price. So that is a problem now. It is a problem that farmers in the rural areas are facing.
Note that point, yeah.
You have Tom?
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Any other members? No? Okay, thank you very much
for
your presentation. Thank you. I'm sure we'll be hearing from you in due course.
Thank you very much.
Members, I'm just going to ask for your permission to take a short break, a comfort break just, and we will start again at 11:25. Thank you.
Committee Room 21. Sound. 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 Committee Room 21. Committee Room 21. Sound. 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 Committee Room.
Okay, now we're back. We have quorum, and we're now going to call the meeting to order again. We're on agenda item 8, members, and it's the Departmental oral evidence session on the overview of the public consultation response to Rural NI, called Our New Approach 2026 to 2041. So, members, I refer you to the pack starting at page 93 to the briefing paper providing a high-level summary of responses to the public consultation. Now going to welcome the following officials to brief the committee and answer any questions that we may have. We have Jason Foy, the Director of Rural Affairs, Claire McAllister, the Deputy Director of Rural Affairs, and Maria Bradley, the Head of Strategic Rural Policy Branch. Thank you very much for attending. Folks, please feel free to brief the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, and thank you very much for the opportunity to present to the committee today. Today's briefing is intended to provide an update on the closure of the consultation for Rural NI, Our New Approach 2026 to 2041. In advance of today's session, we provided the committee with a high-level summary of the emerging themes and trends arising from our initial analysis of the consultation responses. Before I proceed further, I would like to emphasise that this is an interim update. Analysis of the consultation responses is still ongoing, and so it's not intended today to reflect the full breadth of the stakeholder contributions at this stage. We will publish a full summary of the responses on the Department's website within 12 weeks of the consultation closing. So the committee may recall that in November of last year we briefed you on a series of outline rural policy proposals. These draft proposals were developed through a co-design process involving a wide range of stakeholders across rural Northern Ireland over the course of the summer of 2025. We continued to engage extensively with stakeholders, including business sector organisations, agricultural representatives, equality groups and Solace, using feedback from that engagement to refine the outline policy proposals. Rural NI, Our New Approach, sets out 5 draft rural policy proposals, bringing together all of the elements previously reflected in the outline proposals presented to the committee last year, but condensed to reflect feedback from stakeholders in terms of the presentation of the consultation itself. So the consultation opened on the 9th of March and ran for the full 12 weeks, closing on the 1st of June. During that period, we hosted 10 in-person daytime engagement events across Northern Ireland, as well as 1 in-person evening event and 2 online evening events. We also held in the period additional engagement sessions with the Ulster Farmers Union and with youth and sporting organisations. In total, 136 responses were received, 91 through the online survey through Citizen Space, and 45 by written or email return. Of those responses, 58% were from organisations and 42% from individuals. And responses were received from a broad range of stakeholders, including rural community organisations, local councils, farming representatives, rural businesses, and members of the public. So looking across the responses received to date, a number of clear themes are emerging. The first is that there is substantial support across the board for the overall strategic direction of the proposed rural policy. So across the consultation responses, around 4/5 of respondents expressed support for the proposed vision, aims and guiding principles. And this suggests to us that there's broad agreement with the overall direction of travel set out in the policy. Respondents were particularly supportive of community-led approaches, collaboration across government and increased investment in voluntary and community sector organisations. At the same time, there was a clear and recurring message that delivery matters. Respondents want measurable outcomes, practical implementation, and a balanced approach that reflects agriculture, community, and environmental priorities. The second clear message coming from the responses relates to partnership and collaboration.
Respondents expressed particularly strong support for closer working across government with local councils and communities in addressing rural issues. 90% of respondents considered this either very important or important, with 79% of respondents supporting an enabling rural fund. There was also strong support for the long-term investment in voluntary community sector organisations, reflecting the important role these groups play in sustaining rural life and supporting rural communities. Levels of support in these areas were among the highest recorded across the consultation, with 90% of respondents either agreeing or strongly agreeing. There was also positive support for improving the evidence base that underpins the rural policy, including proposals designed to strengthen our understanding of rural needs, outcomes and trends over time. 81% of respondents showed solid support for commissioning a rural baseline study. Support for the Rural Champions model was a little bit lower, but still very positive overall at 76% agreement, and responses in this area highlighted concerns around practical operation, representativeness, effectiveness and the risk of additional bureaucracy if the model doesn't lead to clear impact. The consultation also points to some important nuances. Organisational respondents tended to show higher and more consistent level of agreement across most questions, especially on governance, partnership working, funding mechanisms and evidence-based approaches. Individual respondents were more likely to express neutral or disagreeing views on some proposals, including rural champions and collaboration or funding structures. We also received useful feedback with regard to the Rural Needs Act. Awareness of the Act was mixed, with 63% of respondents saying that they were aware of the Act, but views on its impact were more varied. Only 27% agreed that it had made a positive difference to rural communities, and 52% were neutral. However, there was clear support of 78% for reviewing its effectiveness and considering how its implementation might be strengthened in the future. The consultation also highlighted a number of important priorities for rural communities. These included, firstly, access to services and infrastructure in rural areas, particularly transport, healthcare, housing, childcare, schools, digital access, wastewater and roads. Secondly, respondents repeatedly emphasised the importance of supporting voluntary and community sector organisations, community halls, clubs and volunteer-led groups as part of the social fabric that sustains rural life. At the same time, respondents were clear that delivery will be critical. And while there was support for the policy's ambitions, many respondents stressed the importance of practical implementation, adequate resourcing, measurable outcomes and visible improvements on the ground. A recurring message throughout the consultation was that success will be ultimately judged by delivery rather than intent. Many respondents, particularly individuals and some sectoral organisations, emphasised agriculture, farming and food production as a core rural priority. And finally, there was a strong theme around joined-up working, stronger rural representation and ensuring that lived experience informs decision-making. The impact assessments broadly attracted more qualified support. For the Rural Needs Impact Assessment, 61% agreed with the conclusions and 30% were neutral. For the Equality Impact Assessment, 58% agreed and 33% were neutral. Supportive comments also recognised the importance of both assessments, but a number of respondents also indicated that they should go further in recognising the practical realities of rural disadvantage, including transport issues, hidden harms, isolation, and the cumulative effect of poor services and infrastructure. So in summary, Mr. Chairman, the initial analysis points to a broadly positive response to the overall proposed policy. They also provide a very clear challenge to government to work across government, to work collaboratively, to listen to rural communities and to deliver meaningful outcomes that make a tangible difference to rural people and places. The analysis to date suggests that strong support for partnership working, investment in local communities and a more robust rural evidence base. There's a clear expectation that structures should remain proportionate, effective and grounded in outcomes. We welcome and appreciate all the views expressed by our consultees, for those who took the time to attend our consultation events and give us very considered and thought-provoking responses. These have been very, very useful. The consultation has been very valuable for us as a listening exercise, and the final proposed policy will undoubtedly be better as a result. Finally, Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to outline briefly the next steps. The Department will publish a full summary of responses on the Department's website in August, and then we'll continue to analyse the responses over the summer months and engage with stakeholders, including other departments and local councils, as policy development progresses. The feedback, together with the views of this committee, will be carefully considered in finalising the policy before it is submitted to the Minister. Subject to the Minister's agreement, the final policy will then be brought forward for executive consideration and shared with the committee. Mr. Chairman, that concludes my opening briefing, and I'm happy to take any questions from the committee as usual.
Thank you, Jason. And you will be aware that we, as a committee, we see the rural aspect as an equal partner in the three pillars that we look after: agriculture, environment and rural affairs. But sometimes there are difficulties and tensions between the three. Can I just ask the question, and it's maybe not been picked up in the consultation? It's a fear that I have when departments are faced with their imminent pressures, which are the deliverables now, against the longer term targets. Do you think that the department are going to adequately resource this piece of work? And obviously some of the outworkings have still to be developed because they take time to look at the consultation, but is the department evidence and the Minister in particular that they are serious about this aspect of the area's work?
I think, Mr. Chairman, the Minister has been clear that he does see this as a priority for his department, and that's something we've very much taken to heart. And certainly we are resourced to deliver this policy up to the Executive. What happens after that will be subject to budget and ministerial decisions, either by current Minister or his successor, but at present we're resourced to deliver this policy. What happens after that in terms of outcomes and action plans, budget decisions will have to be taken, and I don't want to preempt what they might be.
Boy. Okay. You mentioned the rural champion.
Yes.
So, is there any terms of reference for that? Is it an office or an individual or part of it?
The proposal is that this will be an individual within the department, so this will be a senior official within the department, so it won't be a separate office set out in statute or an officer or commissioner type role. It will be a senior official within the department working across government to champion rural communities. The nature of the role will have to be refined and developed as we go forward, but certainly we have seen strong support from consultees for that concept, that there is an effort by a senior official within the department, supported by us in the division, to champion the interests of rural communities across government.
Do you envisage that role then would be a standalone role? It wouldn't be subsumed into other pieces of work, and would they then have access to each of the component parts? Because it has been picked out, and I did read in the report that there is an understanding that it looks at the ageing population, the prevalence of older people living at home, the difficulty that people experience who live rurally getting access to healthcare in the same way that someone lives urban, the pressures on schools and stuff. And I imagine that person's work will be cut out for them. So will the development of the policy ring fence and protect that role if it does come forward, that they will not be subsumed into the firefighting piece, but they will be into that wider, as you said, crossed up people. It's an intra-departmental and interdepartmental.
We see this as a very important role. No decisions have been taken as to whether it will be a standalone role or be part of an existing role. That's still to be determined, and we'll take views from stakeholders on that. However, we're clear, and the policy is clear insofar as it's been defined now, that this is very much a proactive, outward-looking role. It is a role which is intended to look outwards across government to champion the interests of rural communities. So it is very much an active role that we see for the rural champion.
I suppose one of the challenges for a rural champion within the department is that it may be seen as not arm's length enough from a minister or a department. Has there been any thought into how that would be evidenced or developed?
Well, we haven't received any feedback during the consultation raising those issues, but I think the rural champion will very much be judged by outcomes, and as this whole policy will be judged by outcomes and delivery rather than structures. The structures are a means to an end for this. The rural champion is not an end in itself. It is what the rural champion does and the ambition that we have for that role. But it is not just for the rural champion alone. Departments have existing responsibilities set out in statute through the Rural Needs Act, which are there regardless of whether or not a rural champion exists. However, we see this very much as being a value-added role where we can give weight to those responsibilities and actually work collaboratively across government. So this role is not about holding other departments to account. They have their own independent statutory responsibilities. This is about promoting and fostering collaboration across government.
That's good. You sort of segued into something that I did want to pick into, and that's that rural impact assessment, which goes along with just about every policy development we have. Is there any analysis on that to establish the efficacy of it? I know it's there. It's like rolling out with a consultation, and people will often try and deconstruct the consultation and say, yes, you consulted, but you didn't do anything with it. And similarly, the rural impact assessment, has there been any analysis of the efficacy of our rural impact assessments to make it give confidence that it's not just a tick box?
Well, I can assure the committee that the rural needs impact assessment that accompanied this consultation was the result of a lot of work from officials within the department, and we approached that very much with the best of intentions. We did get some useful feedback through the consultation, and we will be revising these assessments as we go alongside the policy. So it is very much a work in progress at the moment, but there have been quite positive feedback from consultees so far, but we understand that needs to be maintained.
I appreciate that. And the final one then is, I noticed in the paper that it references the changes in terms of local government, the reduction in the councils from 26 to 11, and for the efficiencies and stuff, which many would probably rightly critique didn't deliver on the expectations from the review of public administration, but we've got that evidence now, and we can obviously do things slightly better. One of the issues then is how funding is tiered down. Is there any aspect of a more efficient funding cascade model, or has that been looked at all yet?
We have had some thought on how and some discussion with local authorities, which is ongoing at the moment, in terms of how our Enabling Rural Fund will work, which we see as an allocation from the department at district council level. But we're very keen to learn, and have been learning from experience, for example, around more efficient models and learning that we can take from the rural development programmes in the past in terms of what we can carry forward, which was good, and what we can improve on for the future. But we've very much got that in mind in terms of this needs to be an efficient and effective and impactful way of delivering funding. And the funding, again, Mr. Chairman, is not an end in itself. It's what the funding does for rural communities on the ground, that it is spent wisely and effectively. And the ethos behind the Enabling Rural Fund and the local strategic partnerships is to engage local communities and local authorities in that, and it is not the department setting out or seeking to dictate to local communities what funding must be spent on. We're trying to make that as broad, within certain parameters, we're trying to make that as broad and as permissive as we can.
But I would also maybe try and weave in the agility of it too, that it doesn't become, it has to be prescriptive because it's public taxpayer money, but at the end, as you said, it is about the delivery, and if we measure that the delivery isn't necessarily hitting the spots where the pressures are, the agility of a process maybe to be tailored.
And those, Mr. Chairman, those two elements of the policy work together. So the local strategic rural partnerships and the Enabling Rural Fund very much should be seen as part of the same package. The Enabling Rural Fund is where we propose to devolve some funding down to rural communities at district council level. The partnerships are the key to this, in terms of they are the mechanism through which local rural needs are identified and solutions are financed. And that is not something that is prescribed overtly from central government, that local communities are best placed to determine their own rural needs. And again, as I say, within sensible parameters, we can provide funding to enable local projects and solutions to be developed and funded and supported in that way.
Thank you very much. Declan.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Jason, for the briefing. It's good to note progress. However, I am very conscious that, okay, we lost a couple of years at the start of the mandate here, which is no fault of the department's officials, and we spent the last 2 years debating a replacement rural policy. We actually demolished the rural policy which had been consulted on, and the rural framework, and now the DAERA interim business plan is saying the commitment date for this rural policy is the 31st of March 27, whenever the mandates end, we're all in Purda. So I find it hard to agree with you by saying that rural policy is a priority of the department, because that timeline wouldn't suggest that that's the case. And that's certainly no fault of your own. And rural communities have been suffering through the loss of the EU Rural Development Programme, and I should declare an interest because I was heavily involved in rural development projects myself as a director of the Muir Community Association. So I suppose going forward, what does that commitment date mean as such, Jason? Yeah. And what is there to support rural communities on the ground between now and then?
Well, the commitment date in the interim business plan reflects the end of the business year. Our intention, is, as I said in my opening remarks, is to work on the full analysis of the consultation responses and the refinement of the draft policy through the summer months. We are aiming to have a revised policy with the Minister in September, and then very swiftly after that we propose to table the policy to the Executive in the autumn. We're very keenly aware of the conclusion of the dates around the conclusion of this mandate. Whilst we have, as officials, obviously and quite properly, have no influence over executive decisions, we will get it to the Executive well in time for it to be considered fully by the Executive and hopefully agreed upon. But again, I want to stress we cannot preempt what the Executive may decide, but we will meet that deadline.
I appreciate that. That's good to hear that, and I appreciate the Minister did say in earlier questioning that, you know, at last year most of those officials were looking at the Farm with Nature scheme, and then they were looking at the rural policy scheme. I suppose what I should say as well, and I highlighted this at the joint meeting with the Communities Committee and DAERA and Infrastructure that you were at, Jason, and I mentioned to the Minister earlier, is about learning the lessons. Whenever that Shaping Places briefing we got in the Senate that day, I was very concerned about some of the terminology that's been used. It seemed the terminology was around main streets and commerce. Now, a lot of communities I represent in Tyrone and across the north, not just Tyrone, they don't have high streets, they don't have commerce, and a lot of their services are outside their community hubs, and their services are outside the 30 mile an hour zone. They're dispersed rural communities, and I know that, and I use Greencastle in Tyrone as an example, whereby in the COVID Small Settlement Grant, they couldn't get funds from the COVID Small Settlement Grant because their community hub was outside the 30 mile an hour zone, which is a complete omission, and the council stepped in and funded them. Mm-hmm. So I think that going forward, a rural policy, in my mind, needs to be directed towards what you already have identified as basic services, supporting community organisations, community infrastructure, and joint up work. And I think that's incredibly important priorities, and I think there needs to be lessons learned. And will there be lessons learned from the likes of that example I gave you? Because I know there's other, like Brickborough was another example where it wasn't eligible for the COVID Small Settlements Grant. Because their infrastructure they were looking funded was outside 30 mile an hour zone was made up. So in dispersed rural communities, it's not as neat as people think it is. Everything isn't just centred around one wee zone. That's the name dispersed rural communities says to all.
Yes. Well, if I could reassure you on that point, our contribution to Shaping Sustainable Places, the £50 million that the department is going to commit, subject to the business case and executive approval, is exclusively for rural communities in Northern Ireland, and we very much have shaped the policy and the design of Shaping Sustainable Places in recognising that reality, that the terminology that certainly was used in that briefing did lend itself more towards urban and towns and cities, etc. Our commitment is exclusively for rural communities, and that is based on settlement size in terms of population and nothing else. So the vagaries around 30 mile an hour limits and where particular facilities are located either inside or outside that don't enter into our consideration in terms of our priorities. For us, with this policy, but also with Shaping Sustainable Places, we're using the established definition of settlements of under 5,000 people and the open countryside. So as far as we're concerned, all of those settlements are within scope for Shaping Sustainable Places, all of them.
Just the last wee point, will there be what will it be like I know that the leader, the lags don't exist anymore, but will there be some sort of a leader approach taken to ensure the involvement of local communities in helping to identify projects and bring them forward?
As far as the rural policy is concerned, absolutely, and that's what we intend the local strategic rural partnerships to be. So whenever and we're working with councils and with our voluntary and community sector stakeholders to try and work out what those structures look like, but there's a lot of learning, positive learning we can take from LAGs and other structures that even preceded those. Plus we have also been consulting with colleagues in other departments around the labour market partnerships and the local economic partnerships to see how they work and see what we can learn from them. But certainly I suspect whenever we finish the more detailed design of the strategic partnerships, you will see familiarities with LAGs in them.
Thank you very much.
Certainly that also holds in terms of the balance between the local authority and the local voluntary community sector. That came through strongly for us in the consultation, that balance being appropriate is very important.
Yeah.
Thank you, Declan. And John, you're next.
Thank you. Thanks to all of you, by the way, for the work on this and for presenting today. I want to say maybe positive about this. I think it's the right step forward, whatever the circumstances that got to the review, and it's something the committee looked at in its very early days. We always have to, and the report does this, acknowledge the challenges around public transport, access to services and all of those things. But we should also highlight the positives of living in a rural community, not least of all the great sense of pride in those rural communities and community ownership. Very often there's community drive behind refurbishment, tree planting, flower planting, keep the village tidy, all these different initiatives that go on, and we should express our gratitude for that. I'm keen that those communities who are already driving that change and those improvements are as involved as they possibly can be, and I note the community-led local development approach and the partnerships will bring together local organisations and community representatives to use that community-led local development approach. Can I ask though, is there going to be a formal structure around this to bring departments, plural, including infrastructure and others, communities, in with DAERA and then link them with councils and those community partnerships? Is there going to be some formal and consistent mechanism to this across areas so that it can be reported upon?
Yes, there is. So we envisage a structure working across central government, and we see the rural champion having a significant role in coordinating and driving that. We also see potential for the presence of some central government departments within the local strategic rural partnerships. So, for example, we will have a seat at the table at each of those partnerships. We will not be chairing, we will not be driving this, we will have our place to support and hopefully enable and connect. But those local structures have to be owned by the local community and by the local authority. But there certainly is a role in central government which we're trying to define in more detail, where we can support and enable without taking over and dictating. Yeah. But within central government itself, absolutely there is structure, and this draws on some of the learning from the TRIPSI framework, where we had working across government. We want to try and embed that much further across central government. So we do envisage a formal structure within at senior official level across departments to make that happen.
Good, thank you.
Any questions from you guys? Happy enough? Tom, you happy enough? Happy enough, Tom? Yeah. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Did you have flight today for your summer? Thank you. Enjoy your break, guys. Thank you very much. Okay, members, we have one. All right, no problem. Okay, members, agenda item 9 then is the Departmental Oral Evidence Session, launch of the consultation of the Nutrients Action Programme 27 to 2030. I refer you to the pack starting page 178 to the briefing paper regarding the launch of the 10-week consultation which launched on Monday. A copy of the consultation document starts at page 182. Okay, members, so I'm going to welcome the following officials to take their seats and then to brief the committee. We have Dr. McAllister Carson, the Chief Scientific Advisor. We have Fiona Dixon, the Assistant Director of Natural Environment Policy Division. We have Brian Irvine, the Head of Environmental Farming Branch. And we have Julie Thompson, the Deputy Secretary and Head of Environment, Marine and Fisheries Group. Good afternoon. Yeah, just bang on 12, so we're
good afternoon.
Good time. Yes. Saying good morning up to this point. Okay, whenever you're comfortable, please feel free to brief the committee.
Good afternoon, everybody. And yes, we're very grateful to have the opportunity to come to the committee today and update you on the consultation on the revised proposals for the Nutrients Action Programme 2027 to 2030. You've already introduced us, Chair, so I'll not go through that again. You'll be aware that the NAP consultation launched just on Monday past. The consultation document and a number of supporting documents are all on the website, and the consultation will close on the 7th of September. You're also aware that the NAP proposals have been developed through a stakeholder task and finish group, which was established by Minister Muir last year, with membership from the agri-food, farming and environmental sectors. And over that time, we've had a considerable number of meetings, over some 60 meetings across the main group, and it's supporting science, technical and economic subgroups. We hugely value and are very grateful for the time commitment and the constructive collaboration by our stakeholders under the chair of Karen Brosnan since last autumn in designing those proposals which strike a balance between the need to improve environmental outcomes and to support a sustainable and productive farming sector. In supporting the launch of the consultation, the stakeholders have emphasised the importance of improving water quality, whilst at the same time ensuring that the measures proposed are practical, proportionate and workable at farm level. And as a result, the measures are focused where necessary rather than a one-size-fits-all. They've been phased over the NAP period to 2030 and are grounded in a combination of regulatory compliance and enhanced advisory support. Following consideration of the consultation responses, Minister Muir intends to seek executive approval, and then we'll re-engage with the committee through the statutory processes for the finalisation of the regulations in this mandate. We know that the consultation document is very lengthy and detailed, and along with the supporting documents, but we appreciate the time for us today and obviously happy to take any questions.
And thank you very much. And just before we get to questions, I'd just like to highlight that the committee held a NAP stakeholder event in November of last year. At that event, we were surprised to hear from stakeholders that it was the first time. We were told at that event that those with environmental interests in NAP had been at an event together with farming interests. We then sent a note of the discussion to the stakeholder task and finish group to inform its work. So, and I think in that, when we set out in that, it was clearly with the objective of trying to help resolve the situation. Hopefully it was useful and made its way to you guys. We're in a much different position than we were perhaps this time last year, which is good to see from everyone's perspective. And one of the most critical elements was that the UFU were critical of the previous draft proposals following the consultation in 2025. And they claimed at that stage there was a lack of stakeholder engagement in the drafting of the proposals. So in light of that, could you outline to us any sort of different approach that was taken this time and how that has been evidenced in the consultation that has now been launched?
Yes, so obviously you're quite right. We got considerable feedback from the last consultation process, and that led us to the stakeholder task and finish group in the autumn, which first met I think in October and then had its last meeting there just at the start of June. So that approach has been fundamentally different. We have worked with the stakeholders very closely. I think Minister earlier outlined all the members of the group for you in terms of who was attending that main group, supported by its subgroups. And I think it's been a very constructive engagement. Everybody has gone into it with openness, and trust is built through the process as well. And fundamentally it keeps coming back to the same issues. How do we improve our water quality and at the same time have a sustainable farming and agri-food industry? And I think there's a lot of commonality in that. Times, yes, things difficult. It would be wrong to say that every meeting went through smoothly. There were challenges, there's no doubt about that. But I think everybody has, and I think the stakeholders have talked about this earlier on in the week, Chair, around the importance of the process as much as the outcome and what they have learned through that process.
I appreciate that, and I think it would be remiss of me not to, without prejudice in the consultation, to suggest that at this point there has been some feedback to suggest that we're in a good space, but we also should learn from the past that if we don't continue to keep the door of communication, listening and then acting open, then we can risk all of that good work going forward. And I'm not prejudging the consultation. But I'm sure we'll all be taking part in it. One of the things that I noticed in the consultation, and this evidence, I suppose, the listening ear of the department, was one of the recommendations, and it seems like quite insignificant, but it was significant enough given the scale of our farms, was the stacking of bales, for instance, and which indicates to me that there are what I'm pointing to, there are practical solutions for measurable problems. If the consultation is agreed and everything goes forward, will there be enough agility to recognise developments in research and development and interventions that can be applied on farm, for instance, to mitigate dangers and stuff, so that the thing remains very live and useful, so that we don't have that line in the sand and we can't measure the changes and improvements and then scale into giving more security to our farming and agri sector?
I'll ask Brian to come in a minute, but I think there's a focus in the document on governance, which is exactly in that space, Chair, around monitoring, review, keeping under review what is actually happening on the ground. And that might be things like the water quality and what's happening to it, but it also might be some more simple things like take up to various schemes and things like that, which indicate how we're moving forward. So we absolutely need to keep learning, keep building on, and we would very much envisage that this is not an end point, it's a continuing journey through it. Brian, do you want to maybe comment a wee bit further?
Yeah, that's right. Out of this stakeholder engagement and the discussions, there's very much been the emphasis that we need to keep working at this and review, and hence there's going to be ongoing governance structures set up with stakeholders, and there's a number of new measures coming in, and we'll need to see how those work, and we'll monitor not necessarily the outcomes in water quality, because you won't see that for a period of time, but things like farmer participation and uptake and things such as the Nutrient Stewardship Programme and the chemical phosphorus fertiliser. We'll want to see a change in that in the quantities used and so on. So it's that ongoing live process I think is important. And yeah, while you wouldn't be legislatively changing things after a couple of years, there might be a need for more advice, more targeted interventions and things. And then that process and ongoing review will then put us on the front foot for the following review that comes after 4 years again. So yeah, I think we've got into a process now that we're going to have more of that ongoing review and involvement of stakeholders right throughout, because that'll be key as well in ensuring good implementation and uptake on farm, because while we design a good programme here, the key is getting implementation and really good implementation on farms.
I appreciate that. The committee also held a more recent secondary roundtable event on the potential for AD to play a part. Keen to say it's not the silver bullet, however it could play a significant part, and that's evidenced through poultry litter in particular. So there's another element of this that, because this isn't a fixed point, and I think everybody accepts that now, but there are developments that could be in the pipeline which could help alleviate a lot of our problems. So we could potentially be looking at 100% of our chicken litter going to energy production, as long as we deal with the digestate and the residual part and in an agreed fashion. But similarly, for slurry, those opportunities still exist. Does this allow for, is there an intra-departmental work going on in regard to this piece on NAP to ensure that we're speaking to the ammonia section, the phosphate section, the planning section, which, when the Minister was here earlier on, we were saying about the principle of betterment, where opportunities exist to do something better, can we expedite that? Because the NAP ambition is directly tied to that.
Yeah, and I think the simple answer to your question is yes. The interdependencies are both recognised and being worked through, so the interdependencies are in the document, and you're absolutely right pointing out to a few of those. And it's fair to say in the discussions with the NAP stakeholders, at times we were discussing ammonia rather than discussing NAP in itself, and that just shows you the join up that there is recognised, and the need to ensure that we can implement things effectively, and that ammonia and AD and all of that is all joined up across the piece. So that's a recognition both at stakeholder level but also within the department about the things that we need to do.
Thank you very much, I appreciate that. Declan.
Thank you very much, and thanks very much for your presentation. The document makes reference to the use of, let's say, low emission spreading equipment. Has there been any account taken for land that is inaccessible, that you could not get low emission spreading equipment onto, particularly hilly and very difficult terrain?
Absolutely. There's a provision in the existing regulations, and that's carried forward, that where it's not possible to use low emission on a field due to slope, then that you don't have to use low emission, and you just need to keep details of that and explain, have a record to say why. So that's always been there, and that will continue to be there. Yeah.
So there'll not be a compulsion on, say, farmers who have very hilly and difficult terrain to try to get lessee equipment onto it, because obviously that would have health and safety issues, pose health and safety issues as well, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
See the makes reference to the nutrient stewardship programme. Could you just elaborate on that in a wee bit more detail?
Yeah, the nutrient stewardship programme is an evolution and an expansion, I suppose, of the derogation programme that's already there, the existing derogation that we've had since the NAP first came in, and when we were in the EU, the terms of the derogation were set by the Commission, and you went back every 4 years to get the derogation decision renewed and so on, and that was in tandem with an action programme review. Now we have, I suppose, a bit of flexibility in how we manage a derogation or that similar provision, and that's how we've developed the nutrient stewardship, to actually improve on what we have there with the derogation, because the terms of the last derogation were set by the European Commission, and those were on a very logical scientific basis, but there were some things in that were sort of standard, not quite one size fits all, but things for applicable for other European countries. And now we've had the opportunity, we've looked at that and said, well, there's things there that actually aren't applicable to Northern Ireland, really. So we're changing some of those conditions around it. But what's important as well is we're, in a way, putting provision in there that enables people to come in and work on reducing phosphorus loadings and things, rather than meeting a particular limit, which had been a barrier before for some farms to come into it. Then they can come in the second tier and then work on reducing down with the aim to getting their phosphorus balance to a lower level. So that is, I suppose, we've had the opportunity in this process to develop something that's more specific to Northern Ireland farming and our farming systems, but actually will deliver environmentally, because we'll get a greater uptake of it and get people into that nutrient stewardship and involved in all the things that requires, which is all about nutrient management and nutrient efficiency. And the more nutrient efficient you are, then the better you are really environmentally, because you've lower surpluses and lower potential for losses to the environment. So that's, we've had a lot of discussion on it, and certainly the environmental stakeholders did have concerns, but when those were talked through and collectively the discussion around the table, the nutrient stewardship programme came out of that, because it's actually the collective view is this will actually drive improvement. It'll drive environmental improvement, and it'll drive nutrient efficiency improvements. And with the nutrient efficiency improvements comes savings in fertiliser and so on. And the bigger picture, you do want to be maximising the use of your organic nutrients and minimising the need for purchased chemical fertilisers, because of the costs, the greenhouse gas footprints, the difficulty in supply. We see it geopolitically, tensions and so on. So the better we can use our organic and circular resources, the better, and that's what the nutrient stewardship programme helps do. And the term is actually changed from derogation, because derogation creates the impression that maybe this is some sort of just let out and let off. It's far from the case, because there's so many things associated which are really about precision farming and nutrient management, and that's what the term better reflects what it is. Yeah.
Just one other wee thing. The target is the 30% reduction as depend on manure processing, and some of the options you put down is like farming additional land or exporting slurry. I know, and there are other solutions or actions. I know that, for example, in the poultry sector, that a lot of farmers don't have that option of have the additional land. If they want to expand their business, or but see the export issue, is it vital that how important do you think it is that we crack this nut of being able to export the litter to parts of the south of Ireland that actually want it, to help us rebalance that P across the island?
Yep.
All I was going to say was, yes, it is very important, and obviously that's a matter that's for the DAERA Secretary of State to be in control of. But we know the importance of really managing that phosphorus and where does it go to, and can it be, if you like, exported away. So it's very important. It's a bit like what the Chair was talking around about the AD facilities and things like that we have a means of dealing with the litter, and I think the poultry sector has shown incredible leadership in terms of what they want to do and how they're actually supporting that to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Nutrient distribution, and that's what nutrient efficiency is about, and then reducing environmental impact, making sure the nutrients are going to where they're needed and not over-applied, because where they're over-applied, then that's where you lead to the environmental issues.
Thank you. Thank you,
Declan. John.
Chair, thank you, and thanks to all of you, and well done on the the progress on this. I'm always pretty upfront about saying that I think I understand the rationale behind the political stroke institutional focus on sector and a business model, but we should always remind ourselves that this isn't about either of those things. This is about every citizen of Northern Ireland and other places as well. And it's about whatever your business model is. Once you turn your rivers green and make your lakes stagnant, well then your reputation of your product is pretty well trashed anyway. Never mind what flows into the seas from those rivers and affects other jurisdictional waters as well. And we really need to continue to refocus on that. This is about every one of our citizens, what they drink in terms of water, what they breathe in relation to air quality. The thing for me is that, there's progress here, and whatever the sector will need, they will continue to have to back innovative approaches, and I hope we do that. I'm going today to see an AD plant after this, so I am in favour of trying to develop these alternatives and work for more scientifically focused solutions. But will there be support, flexibility within the NAP to look at new and emerging initiatives in that regard then, and what scope will there be to support that? Is the first part of the question. And then the second part, and Brian sort of referred to this anyway, what review and report mechanism will there be as we go through this?
I think science is really important and has been throughout the process. Maybe bring McAllister in just to comment a bit on that, but absolutely it's really important that we continue to keep technology advances or any other solutions under review, and the stakeholders are at one on that. Your points at the start around this being important to everybody across Northern Ireland, absolutely. I think every meeting we would start with, what are we here for, and the importance of improving our water quality for everybody. I think it's the one thing that definitely conjoined all the stakeholders in terms of agreeing on that. I think we've talked obviously about the monitoring and review process, and it's fundamental to carrying this through, and that's why I describe this as a journey as opposed to an end point. We absolutely need to keep monitoring it. Alistair, do you want to talk a bit more about science and how that will continue?
I think that the science element, John, is really important in terms of just informing, monitoring, evaluating the programme as it goes forward, but also developing the new innovations The two SBRIs are obviously the small business research initiatives are an important part in terms of our learning, and also in terms of dealing with the phosphorus surplus. So the SBRI, the SULS programme, the Sustainable Utilisation of Livestock Slurry, has objectives around removing 1,000 tonnes of phosphorus per year, and that's in phase 2 now, in the demonstration phases, and the development of that and the learnings from that is really important. And also looking to explore in terms of the egg layer sector, the SBRI, which is around the sustainable utilisation of livestock manure. The SULM SBRI is an important part in terms of exploring the options to remove 1,000 tonnes of phosphorus from the egg sector. It's finished its phase 1, and developments are looking to explore the options for phase 2. So I think really these new innovations and really having learnings and robust data, but as well as the part that they are part of the overall package in terms of addressing the P surplus as we go through forward to 2030 is really important. And there will be other innovations come through as well, but I think just to highlight really those two here and now initiatives, which are very important both from the learnings but also actually in dealing with the phosphorus surplus.
Okay, thank you. And then the review and report stuff, Brian mentioned that a while ago there.
Yeah, no, so there will, what we intend to do is almost, I suppose, continue the process we've got. So we will have a NAP steering group, which will continue to meet. So we've got lots of work we still need to do around implementation, and then we will get into that monitoring and review framework that you're talking about. We'll keep everything, if you like, under review. The document talks about 3 particular measures in particular: the chemical phosphorus fertilisers, the nutrient stewardship programme that Brian was talking about, and the focused approach in targeted areas. But we'll keep everything, if you like, under review and ensure that we are seeing farmers engaging, taking up, because it's fundamental, and I think it unites actually all the stakeholders around. There's no point in putting these regulations in place unless they're implemented and complied with, and that's the fundamental as well. Okay. And monitoring and review will help to make sure that happens.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, John. And just before I bring Gareth in next, I think it's important to set out, I mean, you are operating in a confidence mode here. I'm looking at page 89, which is about looking at the cleaner water piece, which is, it's talking about the approach is a voluntary one, but it's going to be reviewed after 2 and 4 years. And I think it's important that people understand where the confidence is being given. But just in that 2 and 4 years, because I think obviously the global events, and there's things that we can pick up in our atmosphere, things that weather dependent, the temperature of water and climate change is happening, irrespective of kind of what we do here. So I imagine that in terms of that analysis in the 2 and 4 years, this is a very fair approach, I think. But obviously there does need to be those reviews and the built-in measures if things aren't achieved. But I imagine the 4 years looks to me, and I'm not a scientist as you will know when I speak, but I imagine a 4-year review is much more, you're going to have much more data and a much better analysis. I'm just concerned about the 2-year piece, that it wouldn't be used as a lightning rod, because there are global events and things that can happen that can skew figures sometimes.
So I suppose the 2-year review is basically, particularly around the newer measures, and as Brian's already said, you won't necessarily see the improvement in the water quality dramatically improving in that time frame, and there's a lot of lag, particularly around phosphorus in itself. But what we do want to see is that farmers are engaging, taking up measures, participating, and taking those steps along the journey, which give us confidence. So you're right, there is very much a trust factor in this, and a confidence, where basically we're saying, if people are complying, taking up measures, this is the opportunity to do that in a voluntary way. But we will need to keep that under review, and as the governance section sets out, we may then need to move towards, if that's not working, towards extra measures, more advice, and potentially making things mandatory that are currently voluntary. But I think all the stakeholders, that gives confidence to everybody in the stakeholder group that was the best way of dealing with it. So we're giving voluntary an option to show that yes, this can do. We don't need regulation for everything, but that only works if people then enter into that, and particularly in focused areas where potentially you're looking at areas where the water quality is particularly bad or there's particular runoff going on. That's where we really need to see interventions and actions taking place. So there was a lot of work put into that on how we would keep that under control and under review, as much as there was about what's the measure look like in itself. But we think we've had a good compromise for everybody on it, and that people have bought into, but it does require action in the 2 years. It can't be, we'll not do anything and it will all remain the same. So like all of these things, there's trust and confidence to be built, and we need to continue that process with the stakeholders as part of that.
Okay, and just one final point. Obviously, the Loughney Action Plan is happening, which is a separate piece of work, but it's obviously highly reliant on things like this working. And my fear is that what we've been told is the algal blooms will probably happen for a considerable amount of time, regardless of what we do. We're trying to reduce that, and we know from that it's terrible when it happens. But if there's a proliferation in the next couple of years, it's going to be important that the measurements are publicly available so that people can build that confidence that, because there is a significant phosphorus load in the silt already. It's not necessarily going to dissipate over a short period of time, to be fair.
That is absolutely fair, and I think that's publicly understood that's the position that we're in with Loughney. And yes, we are of course proceeding with the actions in the action plan, of one of which is the implementation of NAP. So yes, the connections are absolutely as you describe, and are fundamental. So I think that how that moves forward and the support and all around Loughney action plan is really important, but it won't be instant and it won't be an instant fix. But the data is there and being monitored. Alistair, do you want to talk a wee bit maybe about that?
Yeah, I think it's important, Chair, yes, to recognise and to be upfront that the systems that we're dealing with the P surpluses, there is a lag then in terms of impact on water quality, in terms of lag to water bodies. It goes through soil, P, and then the losses through to water bodies and some direct losses as well. But in essence, when the science subgroup looked at it, we recognised that there are important considerations. The time lag, the recovery timeline between reducing P surpluses and observing improvements in water quality, and they can take 3 to 4 years just on the water bodies. And then the added dimension to Loughney, as you were saying, is that through decades of accumulation of excess nutrients in the sediments, that a significant contribution to the phosphorus within Loughney comes from that source as well. So I think it's really important that we communicate these things so that we understand them, but it doesn't reduce the need for change as the overall message, but we just have to manage expectations in terms of just what the fact that we are going to continue to have issues with blue-green algal blooms.
Thank you so much. Gareth?
Yeah, just focusing there just on 3.2 in your report. It rightly states, funding will play an important role in helping farmers put the proposed measures into practice. And then, of course, they'll require changes how farmers are managed. Some farmers may need to invest in new equipment and infrastructure. And we've seen in the past, where there are various grant streams available, and then farmers hit other obstacles where departmentally you have a competition in policy between various departments, and whilst one department wants to go down a particular route for a really established and well put together outcome, even other departments saying, well, that doesn't just quite sit with our policy and proposals, so this is stalled, and then a funding deadline passes, and despite the best efforts of everybody concerned, public representatives, agents, all the rest of it, even planning council departments, that deadline's missed because there's an imbalance in a direction of travel or a policy. So we see that at the minute. It's happened previously. I was in planning committee and I've seen it. There was pressure put on planning officials to get to an end position and a positive outcome before a particular funding deadline passed for an on-farm style development. I see this happening again because I don't see a change in the say an IEA or SES policy. And how are you then, as a group, going to insist that everyone plays catch up really, really quickly to head in the general direction of travel because we can't have a situation where a farmer wants to make a change and then somebody says, oh, there's something in this hedge that's going to stop you doing this, because it is as ridiculous as that at the minute in time. And I say that respectively to the environment, but we have weightier issues in terms of outcomes versus, a particular minor detail in planning law or policy that is stopping some, really important on-farm developments. And I'm curious and concerned that could continue despite your best effort.
I'll ask Fiona to comment on the funding side in a wee second, but at the essence of your question is around planning and how it will move forward in support of this. So planning's obviously exceptionally complex, lots of players within it. You mentioned NIEA, but you're obviously talking to the Minister earlier about SAS, and then we've got the planning authorities and the councils in and of themselves. So each of those is playing a role in the timing of how they're taking decisions and what they're bringing in under their decision making. From NIEA's perspective, obviously, again, talked with the Minister around that planning performance and improving their time of their responses, and that's going well. And I think Katrina was talking about the statistics around that. So it is really important that we work together, that deadlines are met. All I would say is you've got a very complicated picture sometimes, and it is trying to discern where's the difficulty within the system. And people maybe jump to it's one part of the system when it's actually something else. So I think the real important thing is that the planning system works effectively across the board, and that everybody is cognizant of timeframes and right from the councillors the whole way down and right the way through, including to NIEA. We're working very closely with NIEA around things like ammonia policy and things like that, so I can assure you around that, and that we recognise the interdependencies, as I've already talked to the Chair about. But the funding stream is also really important in terms of providing that funding support. So do you want to maybe talk a wee bit about that, Fiona?
Yeah, just to say that I'm sure you're aware there's development work ongoing with the Sustainable Farming Investment Scheme, and there'll be funding available, I believe being announced shortly, for a £40 million investment scheme. So that'll help with elements of the NAP, including things like the lessee equipment. We're working hand in hand with that scheme to make sure that support is available for farmers who then will have to undertake using the lessee equipment. The correct use of that, of managing your nutrients and using the equipment correctly, also helps target your nutrient management more appropriately. So there's savings to be made there at farm level too. We do recognise even it's outlined in the consultation document that this is a change. There'll be a lot of change for farmers to manage here, and there are programmes of support, and not just from a financial point of view, but advisory support through business sustainability groups and other programmes that support improving water quality, like the Sustainable Catchment Programme. So there's a suite of measures that are complementary to managing the new proposed measures in the NAP.
Yeah, Chair, thank you, and thank you for coming to committee today. Just one issue that I was looking at in the programme that you have there, and it's to do with the change in measuring the milk yield-based nutrient exertion values, where obviously it's going to be based now on the litres per milk or whatever that the cow gives, and that's what your phosphorus is going to be, and your nutrients is going to be measured on. What then implications does that have for a dairy farmer who has their cows housed all the time? Because it's going to have implications for them, and I would have a bit of concern about that.
Yeah, I'll take you through that. At the minute, in our NAP, we have one standard value for the nitrogen that a dairy cow excretes of 100 kilos per nitrogen per year, and there's also a phosphorus value as well. The key value is a nitrogen value, because the nitrogen determines your nitrogen loading and your nitrogen production, and so on, and there are limits around that.
So the proposal is to go to a system where the nitrogen excretion is related to the milk yield. There's a lot of science behind this, and essentially the basic principle is that the higher the milk yield, the more a cow eats and energy it needs in the diet, and the more nitrogen it eats. So, and a proportion of the nitrogen is retained, and a proportion of the nitrogen is excreted. So the higher yielding herds eat more, so they consume more nitrogen, so they excrete more nitrogen. And equally so, on the lower side of things, the lower yielding dairy cows don't eat as much in terms of nitrogen intake, therefore they excrete less. So the one value doesn't actually fairly reflect what happens at all. So in a way, it's far better. What we're about here is about accurately reflecting the nitrogen that dairy cows produce, and that's related to the milk that they produce. So there's different ways of doing that in terms of setting bands for milk yields, and there's a simple system where you have 3 bands. There's a system where you could have a whole lot of bands, and what's proposed here, following all the discussions with stakeholders, are 7 bands, and previously I think we proposed 10, but we've been through all the science and looked at it, and that's the proposal that is out for consultation. But we've gone much further than that, and it indicates sort of the specific nuanced approach we have in NAP here, that it's not a one-size-fits-all, and we're wanting to reflect efficiencies on farms where farms are efficient. So there's sort of 3 ways of calculating it from the milk yield. So you can, from your milk yield, you can accept the banded value that's related to the average milk yield for your herd, or you can calculate the actual value for your herd, which will fall within that band, but the value within the band, or for those higher yielding herds in particular that tend to have a small amount of glazing, or or conserved silage and things like that, not out glazing a lot. There's a specific model and program has been set up for those herds that they can enter a lot of dietary detail, and that will get them a specific number. So again, that's to reflect where those herds are feeding a lower nitrogen diet, and therefore their excretion values will be different from those standard values. So we've developed what we could say is, yes, a more complex system, but it's actually to reflect the efficiencies. And that's to be fair to people, because if they're operating a very efficient system, we want that to be reflected in the nitrogen values they have. The phosphorus values, those are a similar sort of system, but they're actually more simple. And when we've looked at it, the science shows that for most herds, the phosphorus levels are decreasing from what was the standard value. And yeah, those higher herds, it's up a bit, but it's, again, the science behind it all, and a lot of science.
We understand the complexity of that, and obviously there'll be a lot of advisory support that will go in to help farmers, but actually that complexity and the different ways of doing it was at specific request of the stakeholders, because to your point, there is not a one-size-fits-all, but we recognise we're going to have to help farmers to understand that and to work through it. But we think that people will fall then and understand where their herd is and be able to figure that out, that what's the best option that works for them, and that's the advice that needs to be applied.
Well, for a farmer that has a higher yielding cattle, do you see it being a difficulty for them, where it could come to a stage where they would have to reduce the number of cows that they would have?
So in terms of that, this isn't obviously about herd reduction. This is about managing their nutrients.
Yeah. I know,
so I guess it comes back to some of the other conversations around, well, what do you do? Do you need to export your slurry? Do you need to use an AD plant? And yes, you're right, we will need to use all of those levers for a farm to then be able to manage its nutrients down. But the way that the nitrogen excretion is done is to enable people to fit into the right band in a fair way and not treat everybody the same.
Yeah, still have my concerns about that.
That's the stewardship programme, really, isn't it, for the high yields and the high phosphorus. Those bands, there's 3 bands there, 270 to 350, I think. As long as you have entered into that and you're showing an improvement, isn't that right?
I'll explain some of the connections here. So
I can see you smiling. This starts to worry me, Bram, when you start to smile.
Oh no, because there's been an awful lot of thought and discussion on this, and what's designed in this is a pathway for farmers, right? And that's why we've gone to some of the complexity about the N exclusion calculations. But in fairness, the farms that will be using and availing those more complex things are very complex precision operations. And when it comes to the diet base, those farms are likely to be working with nutritionists and things, and actually the scientists have worked with the industry nutritionists to develop the method of calculation and things. So while it's complex, those farms are complex operations anyway, and this is a way to reflect their precision that they're doing. Yeah.
And if I throw the other end of that scale in, if you don't mind, because obviously one of the things that I enjoy doing is going around the shows, and then I see the native breeds, which aren't the high milk producers, the Irish Moil and stuff. So I imagine that what we don't want to see is losing cattle, which certainly have less maybe market value. So how do we ensure that we don't end up just with the continental breeds, the high producing milkers, and then we lose those indigenous breeds?
Well, that's exactly what the system does, because it fairly reflects. It's an accurate reflection of the amount of nitrogen produced. So those lower yielding herds will actually see their nitrogen loading fall. Okay. It'll reduce. So while there's some, the high yielding herds, their end loading will go up. The other ones, there's other ones, the less intensive will, and that's a fair reflection, because
our approach.
It actually reflects what the cows are actually producing. In whatever system. So. And in the system, we settled on 7 bands. The Dutch have a much more complex system, but when you look at our, I suppose, the excretion curves and how it relates, as your milk yield goes up, how the nitrogen excretion changes, our lines just run parallel to the Dutch. So there's a lot of science behind this, it's there. It's basically a system that fairly reflects the nitrogen and the phosphorus that's been produced.
Okay, thank you. Happy enough, Tom?
Yeah, it created a bit of discussion.
I seen you smiling too. So when Brian and Tom are smiling at each other, there's definitely a bit of wrestling
but
going
actually,
on.
I'll finish on the other smile though, because if farms and their nitrogen excretion of their cows goes up, then their end loading goes up, right? But then they need into a derogation or a nutrient stewardship, and that's why the nutrient stewardship, because of the way it's focused on, for the phosphorus, it's on a percentage reduction rather than getting in at a particularly number that would be challenging for some of those high yielding herds, but they can come in and work on a percentage reduction. That's a pathway for them. They can come into the nutrient stewardship,
and they'll get the assistance in that space to do that. It's not just you will do this. It is here's the pathways. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Members, any other questions?
Just that question about the Sustainable Farm. Fiona, you had mentioned there the Sustainable Farm Investment Fund. What is the timeline for that, or is there when will that open?
I don't know the detail of that. I'm sorry, I don't know what the timeline is.
I think Minister said earlier on that it was to be announced next week and then would be opening towards the end of the month. So imminently, I suppose, is the simple answer to that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
No
I really appreciate your time today. Thank you. Okay, members. We're now on agenda item 10. That's the Fisheries, Aquaculture and Water Environment Bill. This bill passed second stage on Tuesday. It's now at committee stage. I refer you to the pack. And the motion to extend the committee stage to 5th February 2027, which is at page 325. As members are aware, following the second stage debate on Tuesday the 30th, the committee stage commenced on the 1st of July, and the last day of committee stage was scheduled to be the 7th of October, by which time the committee should let its report unless the committee seeks and is granted an extension. Are you content that we agree this proposed extension date? We have previously been advised by the Bill Office that any later dates would leave exceptionally tight times for remaining stages, and we will aim to complete before this date. Members content for the 5th of February 2027. Members, in light of our members, in light of our experience with the Adaptation Bill, we wrote to the Department requesting that officials provide us with tables to show us clearly the interactions between this bill and other relevant legislation, and what are new powers, modified powers, etc. So I refer you to the pack starting on page 326, the response from the Department, which provides an outline of the structure of the bill, which is at Annex A, detail of how the bill interacts with other fisheries and water environment legislation, which is Annex B, A summary of the provisions of the bill, noting new powers, modifications and powers derived from other legislation, Annex C, detail of the offences and revised penalties, Annex D, and detail of how the Fisheries Act 1966 will be amended by the new bill, Annex E. Members can consent to note at this stage. We will, of course, return to this information after recess as we progress the committee stage. So now I refer you to the Delegated Powers Memorandum at page 450. Are you content that the DPM is forwarded to the Examiner of Statute Rules for her advice on delegated powers in the bill? Yep. Thank you, members. I also refer you to the draft stakeholder list at page 458. The members have any comments? Are you content to note or content with the draft stakeholder list? As with all bills, we can invite other stakeholders if needed. If any of them come to you, members, you can always feel free to chip them in. So, members, I also refer you to the draft citizen-based questions starting at page 460. If you have any comments, are you content that the call for evidence and citizen-based questions are drafted and the team will issue next week? Okay, I refer you to the bill timetable starting at page 470.
Just for apologies. Just on the stakeholders list, yes. I'm not seeing, I may be missing it. Aquaculture, and it's there at the top. It's okay. I thought they weren't there.
Got it. All right. Okay. Good, ma'am. Thank you. And so we've got the bill timetable starting at page 470, and this is just for information to the stage members. Okay, and I refer you to the table of papers, the draft press adverts for the bill at page 96. If you have any comments, are you content with the adverts as drafted? Thank you, members. Agenda item 11 is the SR 2026-116, Conservation, Natural Habitats, etc. regulations. We first considered this SL1 in February 2025 before we began the new process for considering subordinate legislation, and on the 20th of February 2025, following an oral briefing from officials, we agreed the Department could progress with the SR. The statutory rules made under Section 14 of the retained EU Law, Revocation Reform Act 2023, and is subject to negative resolution procedure. So on page 474 of your pack, there's correspondence from the Department dated the 24th of June. It explains the delay in the regulations, that it was due to the lengthy process of drafting and seeking approval from DAERA officials, followed by seeking official consent from the DAERA Secretary of State and from the SOS for Northern Ireland. However, despite the delay, officials state that there has been no policy change since the briefing was provided to the committee. So now I refer you to the following documents in the main pack: the SL5 at page 475, the draft SR, which is at page 477, and the explanatory memorandum starting at page 479. So if members are content, I will now put the question on the SR. That the Committee for Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs has considered SR 2026-116, the Conservation, Natural Habitats, etc. Amendment Regulations Northern Ireland 2026, and has no objection to the rules subject to the ESR report. Are members agreed? Yeah. Thank you, members. Agenda item 12 is the SR 2026-124, the Dangerous Dogs Compensation Exemption Scheme Amendment Order, Northern Ireland 2026. Members, you will recall last week we considered the SL1 and considered a Clerk's memo dated the 16th of June, reminding us of the background to the matter and covering the issues raised at the informal meeting between myself and the Deputy Chair and the Minister on the 15th of June. As we have previously noted, this matter arises from the Dogs Trust decision to remove third-party public liability insurance benefit from its companion club from the 1st of July. Members, as we noted last week, the purpose of the SR under the negative resolution procedure is to remove the legal requirement to have third-party liability insurance in place for prohibited breeds, and also to introduce a new exemption condition which requires that children under the age of 12 not be left in close proximity to a prohibited breed in a home or private setting without adult supervision. The SR will come into operation on a phased basis, with the removal of the insurance requirement taking effect from the 1st of July. The introduction of the new exemption condition will take effect on the 1st of November, as there is need to get councils on board and get owners prepared. The Minister stated that he was meeting the councils on the 16th of June in the matter, and that DAERA will support the councils as far as possible going forward. So, members, I now refer you to the following documents in the main pack: the SL5 letter starting at page 482, the draft SR at page 484, and the explanatory memorandum at page 487. The call for views using the Citizen Space platform closed on the 27th of June and received 0 responses. The Department states that there have been no changes since the SL1 was submitted to the committee. Members, last week we agreed the Department proceed to make the SR, and I'm going to put the question on the SR. That the Committee for Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs has considered the Dangerous Dogs Compensation and Exemption Schemes Amendment Order Northern Ireland 2026 and has no objection to the rules subject to the ASR report. So, members, are you agreed? Okay, members, thank you. Agenda item 13 is Departmental written briefing, the Tree Planting Action Plan. So, members are referred to your pack, page 491, the briefing paper, providing an overview of the development and progress through stakeholder engagement of the Northern Ireland Tree Planting Action Plan, which was expected to be launched shortly by the Minister. The Action Plan identifies actions to encourage increased forest cover to meet Climate Action Plan commitments for forestry. Current annual planting target of 600 hectares needs to be increased to 2,100 hectares by 2030, and to increase afforestation levels from the current 8.6% to 12% of land area by 2050. The Department led in the development of the Action Plan and the Forest Service, which will be responsible for its implementation, and engaged in the Strategic Investment Board engage with the SIB to facilitate its development. The action plan seeks to address issues that fall within 4 strategic categories. 1. Governance and implementation, communication and knowledge transfer, education, capacity building, research and evidence. Within these 4 categories, 10 strategic actions have been agreed, along with 31 implementing actions. The strategic actions include establishment of a delivery working group of forestry sector stakeholders, policy alignment and delivery within DAERA, central and local government and external stakeholders, develop and implement a sector-based communications and events programme to encourage tree planting across sectors, and provide information on the financial and economic modelling on the investment value of woodlands. Have you any comments you content to note? I know in some of the meetings that I'd had with foresters, obviously you have those storm events which are wiping out swathes of forest too, which is, so it's not, some of the stuff is natural that's happening too, and that's one of the things that we need to always be mindful of when we're debating those figures and stuff. So I know that the Department and Forestry will be cognizant of that, but I think it's always useful to have the scale, because I think in the last couple of storms it's been considerable in terms of the loss of hectares of significant long-standing trees. Okay.
Chair, would you want to know how they're taking that on board?
Yeah, members be content if I just write every question in regard to that, how it's quantified, how it's measured and stuff, because it's not, that of itself is not a failure, but it needs to be part of the evidence. Okay. Thank you, Clerk. Agenda item 14 is a departmental written briefing, Forest Service Business Plan 26-27. So on page 98 of your table papers, and a briefing paper, a copy of the plan starts at page 101. Delivery plan will deliver a programme of forestry and plant health activities which align with the Department priorities in support of a programme for government and contribute to the DAERA Corporate Plan 25-27, in particular delivery on the Climate Action Plan. It proposes 13 Forest Service agency level targets, 6 of which are set at ministerial priorities, and designates as KPTs. These 6 are: create at least 600 hectares of new woodland, implement updated forestry grant schemes to support an afforestation programme in line with the Climate Action Plan commitments, develop and publish a tree planting action plan, manage DAERA forest in compliance with the UK forestry standard, remove self-seeding conifer trees from 400 hectares of open habitat peatland identified for restoration. But quite a bit there, guys. We were talking about the peatland bogland deforestation angle. They're going to take another 400 hectares out of self-seeding stuff. So it's complex work. Number 6 is to bring to market selected Forest Service sites for development of renewable energy generation projects by 31st of December 2026, which has been a missed opportunity to this point, I think. A core part of Forest Service work is protecting the plant health status of Northern Ireland by ensuring delivery plant health official controls required under the Windsor Framework, and a programme to reduce risks of the introduction and spread of plant pests and diseases. Forest Service will continue its programme to improve employee engagement, capability and capacity, including a graduate trainee and forester apprenticeship programme and an updated employee engagement action plan. So members, have any comments you can tend to note? Okay. Agenda item 15 is correspondence. The correspondence memo starts at page 497 of the pack. I'll highlight a few items and seek agreement the others are actioned as per the memo. Are members agreed? Thank you, members. At 15.3, referred to the pack, page 588 for correspondence dated 24th of June. The clerk has copied into from the DAERA Permanent Secretary to the clerk to the DSC committee. It provides notification of recent updates regarding the application of the EU deforestation regulations. That's the EUDR in Northern Ireland, and the Secretary of State for EFRA has designated DAERA as a competent authority for its enforcement. As a result, DAERA has responsibility for enforcement of 5 of the 7 key commodities linked to deforestation. That is cattle, cocoa, coffee, soy and palm oil. This will be a completely new statutory function for DAERA to discharge, and will be delivered under the direction and control of the Secretary of State for EFRA as provided for in the Windsor Framework. Yeah, I'm not sure why we'd have cocoa in there, but it'd be great if we could grow our own chocolate. Anyway. 15.4, I refer you to page 591 of the pack to correspondence dated 25th of June from the clerk to the Committee for the Economy, seeing the views of all Assembly statutory committees regarding the Regional Balance Bill by 22nd of September. It agreed to launch its call for evidence in advance of completion of the second stage, which is expected in September. This private member's bill seeks to improve the Executive's response to regional imbalances in economic performance and living standards. The bill would create a statutory duty requiring the Executive to adopt, deliver and maintain a regional balanced strategic framework to address the imbalances, imposing a duty on all departments to pay due regard to the framework when developing policy strategies and plans, and requires annual reporting to and scrutiny by the Committee. The Department for the Economy will have a lead role in monitoring, reporting, issuing guidance and conducting research to support delivery. So members, do you wish to respond to request that the Economy Committee consider whether the regional balance framework should include a clear rural dimension rather than treating regions as uniform areas, as rural disadvantage can be hidden within wider regional averages, and to consider whether the bill and framework will adequately reflect rural specific economic and social challenges? It's an interesting dynamic, that actually, because I do think that there are areas where even in urban areas, poverty is hidden because the metric that's used to identify the fiscal advantage in the area then disqualifies those who are in that level of poverty in that area. So it's a complex piece. It sounds like a good idea, but I think with our remit in terms of that rural piece, I think there's a piece of work for us in this. Declan?
Chair, I recall years ago this was something that was considered talked about at this committee, and I remember in Scotland, the Church of Scotland did a lot of work on that there, where they identified that the measures for assessing poverty in rural areas, poverty didn't fully represent the extent of poverty in rural areas, and even here, the way the different indicators are balanced, for example, the access to services one is only something like 10% of the overall value for the figure here. So it is a very complicated piece, and it does have big implications.
Agree.
I know, like in rural areas, for example, because there's a lack of public transport, people are forced to own a car or own a second car, which might not be the case in an urban area, and that doesn't count until deprivation statistics. So there's a lot of factors there, So, yeah.
Yep.
Chair,
yes.
Just wish me to respond on
Yeah,
behalf of the committee then, just raising those points.
Absolutely. I mean, and we had with the presentation earlier on with Jason and the team from the department in terms of the the new rural framework, which is timely for this because it'll freshen us up and sharpen us up for that piece of work. Yeah.
Well, we can write and ask that committee remain cognizant.
And
it's being done by the economy committee.
And also, I would maybe point them that all of these policies are being developed, but they're maybe not interacting. But I think there is an interaction with that. Yeah. The development of that rural.
Very briefly.
Yes.
I'm mindful that we have colleagues, all of us, on economy and infrastructure, who might be looking at this separately, and politically, and with the committee as well. So I don't necessarily want to clash with that. But to follow up on something you said there, and Declan as well, there are pockets of deprivation in rural areas which are ignored when things are looked at on an electoral ward basis. Mm-hmm. Yeah. They simply don't hit the radar, and there can be people in pretty extreme difficulties, but the area overall will look pretty affluent on a register, and it's something that we could ask if they're taking that into consideration. And I could think of towns and villages in my own area where that's the case, and it will be across the piece.
Yeah, no problem.
So that brings us cross departmental, you say, John, that NISRA, that brings in Department of Finance as well, so it's cross departmental.
Thank you. Yes, you have enough, Clerk?
Yeah, we'll do a response on behalf of the committee to the Economy Committee, asking that they take all those considerations into account in their committee stage.
Please, thank you very much. Okay, members. Okay, then 15.5 referred to the packet, page 592, for a memo from the Clerk of the Public Accounts Committee regarding its review of the primacy of the NIA reports. It has agreed to undertake an inquiry into a strategic review of the Planning and Appeals Commission, and has also agreed to release its primacy over the NIAO report, Flood Risk Management in Northern Ireland, 16th of June 2026, and up-to-date table listing the NIAO reports over which the PAC currently retains primacy starts at page 594 of the pack. Any comments? And a note that a couple of members are members of the PAC. So, okay, 15.6 members are referred to back at page 595 for a copy of the OEP paper titled Progress in Improving the Natural Environments in Northern Ireland. This was led in the Assembly on the 23rd of June 2026. So, any comments? Content to note? Thank you, members. 15.8 members are referred to table paper starting at page 120. The correspondence from the department dated the 30th of June regarding its intention to launch a targeted 8-week stakeholder consultation on the hemp amendment regulations. And that starts on the 6th of July. A copy of the stakeholder letter and policy document highlighting key changes. The draft regulations will be introduced or attached to the annexes A and B and start at page 122 of table papers. The regulation will amend the current domestic legislation, the Hemp Third Country Import Regulations 2002, on a Northern Ireland basis, primarily to raise the maximum acceptable. You can say that one.
Cannabis.
Yeah, that's a THC content from 0.2% to 0.3% in hemp and hemp seeds imported from third countries, amongst other technical amendments. EU hemp legislation relating to third country imports are directly applicable in Northern Ireland under Annex 2 of the Windsor Framework. As a result of updates to EU regulations, the hemp third country import regulations 2002 require updating amendments in respect of Northern Ireland. Any comments you can tend to note? Thank you, members. Okay. So there's no forward work programme. We would consider that when we return it in September. Is there any other business, members? Okay, agenda item 18, date, time, place of next meeting. I wish you a good recess, members. The next committee meeting is planned for Thursday, the 10th of September at 10 a.m. in room 21, Parliament Buildings. Thank you.
Just that the chair traditionally buys lunch for all the members at the end.
Does he indeed? Yeah.
Committee Room 21. Signed. 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 Committee Room 21. Sound. Committee Room 21. Sound.